Hi, I'm Andy Shalal. I'm the owner of Busboys and Poets. We are so happy to have Rock Newman and the Rock Newman Show join our tribe here. We are a tribe. This is a place where racial and cultural connections are consciously uplifted, a place where art, culture, and politics intentionally collide. This is a space to take a deliberate pause and feed your mind, body, and soul. We believe by creating such a space, we can actually change our community, change DC, and change the world for the better. And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Good morning, and I am Rock Newman, and I first need to say I absolutely love what I do. I love my new job, and it's not so new anymore. What makes me say that here this morning with a great big old smile on my face is that my first guest is nothing short of an absolute legend in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, and his reach and his influence goes way beyond the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. You know, that word legend is thrown around often, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But part of what I want to do is sort of sit here and let you know that today is September the 21st, 2013. We are at Busboys and Poets, and we invite you to come down. Every time that I say that I'm at Busboys and Poets, I smile. I'm on the stage at the Langston Hughes Room at Busboys and Poets, and all of that just feels really, really, really good. We were off last week, and I've been chomping at the bits to get back here to talk to our guests and to share with you. So I was talking about folks throwing around the term legend, and it really is thrown around too much. Another term that can be used to describe my next guest is an institution all unto himself. My guest is a gentleman who for 42 years, camera, look at my fingers, read my lips, 4-2, that's 4 and 2, meaning 42 years. He has been the Sunday morning voice of WHUR 96.3. And for those who don't know what those call letters stands for, that's Howard University Radio, which is an institution in this Washington metropolitan area. And Patrick Ellis has been the morning host for all 42 years on Sunday mornings playing gospel. Now, let me just share with you, back in 2005, when I participated officially in the last boxing match, boxing-related event, we produced and promoted Mike Tyson's last fight at the MCI, what was then the MCI Center. It's now the Verizon Center. It was 2005. I think it was June or July the 11th, 2005. And what I decided to do, as opposed to spend money with like USA Today and the Washington Post and more traditional advertisers for a sporting event, I decided that I really wanted to help turn this into an urban event. So I went out to find out who had the listening audiences that I wanted to try to target, where we could get the biggest bang for the buck. So I go out and I find these incredible statistics. And they spoke to how Patrick Ellis's Gospel Spirit show on Sunday morning, and I don't remember the specifics, and I don't know if Pat really wants to even talk about it, but here's what I remember, is that if we wanted to advertise to an urban market on Sunday morning, let's say there are 50-some stations, 60 stations in the market, general market, urban market, Asian, Hispanic, whatever it might be, Patrick Ellis had like a 6 share of the market. Now, that might have been 8. It might have been something else. But he had like a 6 share of the market. And everyone else in the market their highest percentage was a 2% share. So not only is he like number one, where, oh man, he just edged out this one, his programming and HUR on Saturday mornings obliterates the entire radio landscape. It is an institution. Patrick Ellis is an institution, and I am very happy to have him on the Rock Newman Show. Patrick Ellis, welcome to the Rock Newman Show.
Thank you, Rock. Thank you so much.
Man, oh man, oh man.
My pleasure to be here with you.
42 years.
Yeah. Let's maybe correct one little thing. I've been at HUR for 42 years, since 1971 when the station signed on. Friday, December 10th, 1971 is when the station officially signed on.
Yes.
I've been at the station for 42 years. I've been on the air, actually, for, this will be my 36th year, because I signed with the gospel, gospel spirit.
Okay. So we'll take 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
We'll take it. But yeah, I came on the air in 1979, May 27th. At 6 a.m. is when I signed on with Gospel Spirit, our gospel show. That was an interesting story you told about the advertising and the market share, because the audience of the show for years, maybe not so much now, but it's been kind of disguised, so to speak. Now, who would think that on Sunday mornings in Washington, D.C., the most popular radio show, period, not just gospel radio.
Oh, not even,
radio,
period.
right,
Yes.
is Gospel Spirit on HUR from 6 to 11. So that was an interesting story you told about.
And I wanted to give
share.
I wanted to give it that kind of context, and you just helped there, because perhaps even as I was telling the story, maybe they thought gospel radio. No, I'm
Right.
talking about radio, period. I mean, you got to understand what this would be like, for example, the Washington football team winning 200 games in a row in terms of a comparison to what Patrick Ellis' Gospel Spirit does, and how it literally obliterates all competition on Sunday morning.
But for years there was sort of a mystique about all that, because, I mean, with advertisers, I mean.
Yeah.
You know, the thought of advertising on Sunday?
Yeah.
with a gospel show. I remember years ago, Nutrisystem, you know, the weight loss people. Years ago, maybe back around 1969, I think, late 60s. No, pardon me, 1979. And they had a program where they would go around. They went around the country and they identified different DJs who wanted to lose some weight. Right. And they said, okay, we'll put you on your program if you do these live testimonial ads on the radio. Right. You know, testimonials for Nutrisystem, because you go in every week and you get weight. So anyhow, they came to HUR, and HUR so they said, what would be the best jock to pick? And they said, well, Patrick's got the biggest audience in the world. But when Nutrisystem found out it was on a Sunday and they played gospel music, no, that's not what we want to advertise. Until our salespeople sat down and showed them the stats like that you were talking with. So
And you know, and the interesting thing is there is a broad audience, but also there is a maniacally loyal audience.
Yeah, they are.
For your show.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right.
So let me ask you, and you know, I all due humility, I certainly understand and respect that.
Yeah, because the word legend is scary.
It's kind of scary.
The institution is scary.
You know what? And it should be for most people, and you should wear it with just great ease, because, Patrick, you know, your body of work, that's what defines, I think, a true legend. And your body of work is a body of work that is so universally respected. You know, as I thought about having you on this weekend, I called up different people, you know, and I kind of wanted to get people's, you know, take on Patrick Ellis, some folks that have known you for a while. And, you know, I wanted to just get a sense. And I've got to tell you, man, you're universally appreciated and respected. What I wanted to ask you is, you know, if ever sort of in your quiet time, you look and question and wonder what the magic really is, because it's some magic going on. It's something really, really special.
I ask myself all the time, You know, even though it's been 36 years. I mean, sometimes I had to pinch myself and to see if is this real. And it is real, and I understand it's real, but it's in another sense it's surreal. You know, the fact that it's been 30 into the 36th year now, and the success of the show, the presentation that I put on the air every Sunday, and you know the many loyal fans and listeners that we have, and who have been listening for many years. You know, I've actually been able to build a family.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
A family on the air, and they were all interconnected. You know, because they're people who listen here, but then they've got relatives over here who listen, and those relatives have got church members over here who listen, and it all connects and it all comes around into full circle, and it's amazing.
Yeah. You know, from 2006 through 2010, I spent nearly 80% of my time in Bermuda.
Okay.
And Bermuda has an incredibly strong religious community. And I've got to tell you, man, when Sirius Radio first started to come out, and when you guys, you know, went up, how fascinating it was. You get in a cab in Bermuda on a Sunday morning, and I'm telling you who's playing.
Okay.
Patrick Ellison, the gospel, WHUR's Gospel Spirit, for those who have it.
I know Bermudians are Redskins fans, but I didn't know that they listened to HUR as well. But we were talking earlier about some of the listenership from far away.
Yeah.
As I mentioned that just maybe 10 days, 2 weeks ago, I got an email from a couple who listened from Ghana, West Africa.
From Ghana.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I got an email last week from someone who said they listened from Sweden.
Yes.
So with the internet nowadays, you just don't know who may be listening and where they may be. You know.
Yeah, that is that you know. So as I mentioned there, once I shared that you were going to be on the show, I started getting, you know, sort of inboxes, people wanting to have special questions and whether or not, you know, they'd be able to call in, that sort of thing, and they came from everywhere.
Okay.
Patrick, if I could ask you to go back, you know, we certainly are going to get into, in a deep kind of way, I hope, all about Gospel Spirit and, you know, when you actually, you know, came on the air and started broadcasting that 6 a.m. Sunday morning. But prior to that, if we could go back, and if you could give a sense of that 42 years ago, December the 10th, when 1971,
Right.
when WHUR launched. I want to give you, I want to give you sort of something that I connect with. I had the neighbor that lived 2 doors down from me. He was like a ham radio operator. So he's always doing stuff with radios and tinkering and everything. Right. And he came up to my house where I lived, and you know, at the time I was a sophomore. Yeah, I was a sophomore at Howard.
Okay.
And he said, I heard, you know, this so-called WHUR. He said, you know, they bought that from the Washington Post. The Washington Post gave it to him. I forget how.
Yeah, I was going to say, stop right there, like Regis says. Yeah, the Washington Post Catherine Graham actually gave the license, because WHUR used to be WTOP-FM, and it was owned by the Washington Post.
Right.
And for this reason and that reason, Catherine Graham decided to give the license to Howard University so that it could be, I think the idea was it could be used as a training laboratory, training facility for students at Howard, because coincidentally, ironically, around the same time that Catherine Graham was deciding to give this license to Howard, Howard was planning to open a school of communications.
Right.
So they both kind of came together conveniently, I guess you'd say, at the same time. So Catherine Graham gave this license to Howard University, you know, a 50,000 watt FM radio station with a very powerful signal, and she gave it.
Yes.
To Howard, and of course HUR launched in, as you said, 71.
Yeah. So I was saying, so the guy comes up and he tells me, and I was a student at the time, as I said, I was a sophomore, a baseball player, and wasn't paying any attention to anything except trying to hit it out the park.
Okay.
And so my neighbor comes over and tells me, you started Howard University just started a radio station. That's what I know about the start of it. You were there in the beginning. Can you give the audience looking in here and listening today a sense of what it felt like to be a part of something starting up like that new 42 years ago?
Yeah, it was an experience for me. I sort of kind of walked in the back door because my sister-in-law, Kay Lindsay, had worked in radio in New York at WBAI, I think it was.
BAI, big station in New York.
Right. It was
yes.
a Pacifica station, affiliated station in New York. So Kay had done some radio in New York when she lived there for a while, and then she came back home to D.C. and she got herself a job at HUR as a producer on the original staff there. And so shortly before the station went on the air, she and I were literally, our family, we were literally sitting around the kitchen table, dining room table on a Sunday afternoon having dinner, and in the midst of the conversation, she says, why don't you come up there to this radio station and co-host a show with me? And I'm like, okay, that sounds good, because I had tried to get into radio earlier, back in the late 60s.
Well, you certainly have the voice.
Well, but it wasn't about the voice at that time, excuse me, in 1970. But yeah, it was literally in a Sunday afternoon dinner, and she invited me to come up there and co-host a show, a public affairs show with her. And the next thing I know, 2 days later, I'm sitting there in front of a microphone co-hosting a radio show.
And the rest is history. Patrick, I know you'll understand this more than anybody else that sits in that chair. We are up on the clock, and we've got to take a break. We'll be back in a few moments with the Washington, D.C. institution and legend, Patrick Ellis of Gospel Spirit, WHUR 96.3, award-winning #1 Sunday morning radio show. Patrick Ellis will come back in just a few moments on the Rock Newman Show.
My baby drives a pro handcuff.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the Markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a pro handcuff.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rock Newman from The Rock Newman Show. And I am absolutely flattered to have as one of my fine advertisers the DMV's greatest corporate citizen. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the Pohanka Automotive Group. If you have any automotive needs whatsoever, if you want to sell your car, buy a car, trade in your car, have your car serviced, whatever you need, see my good friends at the Pohanka Automotive Group. You will be well taken care of, I promise. I'm Rock Newman. I might be there. Come on down and see our good friends at Pohanka Automotive Group.
And now, The Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back, folks. Again, today is another spectacularly beautiful sunny day in Washington, D.C., in the District of Maryland and Virginia area. We have at the desk with us our very special guest for this segment, Patrick Ellis of Gospel Spirit, WHUR's award-winning Sunday morning program. And before we went to break, we were talking about a variety of things about the onset of the founding and the formation of WHUR. You know, if we go back there in those early days, as you said, Howard University at the same time was establishing a school of communications. And I've got a couple of connections there that folks who have become really influential, lifelong friends of mine and influential people in the world. I speak of one, Tony Brown, who had the longest running public affairs program, PBS show at one point, Tony Brown's Journal, Black Journal, which became Tony Brown's Journal. And then another person who was early on at WHUR, I think as general manager, Kathy Hughes.
Well, we need to rewind the tape.
Rewind the tape.
As we used to say.
That's why we bring the experts on.
Okay. Tony Brown was the dean of the newly formed School of Communications.
Correct.
Okay. And the first general manager at WHUR was a man named Phil Watkins, who came from a Pacifica radio background. But Phil was the first general manager at WHUR, and there were actually a couple other general managers before Kathy Hughes eventually became general manager. After Phil Watson, it was Tom Jones and John Simpkins.
Okay.
And then later on, Kathy Hughes came to the helm. But yeah, Tony Brown was the first dean of the School of Communications at Howard. And I thought he had an interesting, format, I guess you might say, in that a lot of the professors, because I was in the School of Communications myself early on, in 1970, when it was just starting up.
Sure.
And Tony Brown was, as I said, he was the
dean of the
School of C at the time.
Right.
And what he did was a lot of his faculty were people who actually worked in the communications industry. So, you know, when you took a class in sales and marketing, a guy named Alex Exum was the instructor, and at the time he worked for J. Walter Thompson in New York City, and he used to commute down to Howard to teach the classes. And you had the late Roy Woods, who was a noted radio journalist and commentator out of Chicago, and he taught some of the journalism courses. And you had Lionel Monagas, who at the time worked at the FCC, and other people on the faculty who were actually working in the business, in the industry. So they brought a lot of real life experience
Yes.
to the class.
Not just book learning,
Right,
academia.
right.
They were doing it, and so
Right.
therefore their ability to impart
Right.
what the students should be learning
Right,
was
right.
invaluable.
So that was Tony Brown's spin, his take. And then, of course, Phil Watson was the first general manager of HUR, like I said, who came from a Pacifica background. So he had a lot of experience in radio. And as I said, when Katharine Graham gave this license to Howard, I guess her intent was that it would be a training laboratory for Howard students, which it still is to this day.
Sure.
But there's one difference, and that is that HUR, even though it's owned by a university, HUR is a commercially licensed radio station.
Yes. Yes.
And we've always had a staff of broadcast professionals running the station, and the students have an opportunity to come through the station, take internships, and get experience in broadcasting. But the station has never been a student radio station. It's always been run by professional broadcasters, and as I said, we have a commercial license, and so we're out here in the marketplace. Look, there are about 40 radio stations, roughly, in the D.C. market, roughly 20 AM, 20 FM.
Right.
And we're out there competing for market share.
Yes.
We're duking it out with a lot of these conglomerates around town that own other radio properties.
Sure.
And we're out there competing for market share to make money.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and HUR, Katharine Graham granted it
Right.
to Howard, probably not really ever envisioning
I agree.
the incredible economic engine
Right.
that it would become.
I
a
agree.
economic powerhouse. So in terms of gifts that Howard has received,
Right.
other than the millions of dollars that it gets every year from the federal government, it's perhaps the greatest gift in terms of what it does economically.
Correct.
That has ever been given
I agree with you.
to the institution.
I don't know. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But I bet you Katharine Graham didn't really envision how this story was gonna end, so to speak.
Sure.
And I remember I was down at the post one day, waiting to pick up my wife from work because she's a sales manager down there, and there was this Kodak moment when there's this limo and a driver, and Katharine Graham comes out of the post with Henry Kissinger. They said goodbye to each other, gave a hug.
Yeah.
Kissinger walked up the street. So now here's this Kodak moment with Katharine Graham just by herself, nobody around, standing in front of the post, getting ready to walk around and get in her limo and be gone.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there parked, and I was thinking, should I get out of the car and go to Mrs. Graham and say, why did you give that license to that state?
What were you thinking about?
What were you thinking about when you gave that license to Howard? But you know what? I chickened out. And she got in the limo and went on about her
that
business.
Kodak moment, that's kind of one of those, man, that's good white people right there.
Right.
Let me, so we mentioned Kathy. Kathy wasn't the original general manager.
She was not.
She was not.
Correct.
However, when you talk about the history of Howard University Radio,
Okay.
something that comes to mind for those who are aware, and most are, is the format called the Quiet Storm.
Okay.
And Kathy put her signature, is our understanding, on that, was involved when that originated. And it seems as if that's a strong part of her sort of legacy, in her putting a footprint on making her mark in the broadcast industry.
So your question to me is?
My question to me is, do you remember when the Quiet Storm first came on and sort of the reaction to it? Now, everyone thinks because he was so incredibly popular,
Melvin.
that Melvin Lindsay was the first host of Quiet Storm.
Yeah.
My understanding is he was not.
You know, the whole Quiet Storm story has different shades, different hues, different versions.
Depending on who's telling
it. Depending on who's telling it.
Okay.
Now, I don't know who was this host, the supposed host. I don't know who this supposed host was before Melvin. I know what Melvin's story is, and I have that story on video.
Uh-huh.
I produced.
Tell us about that, man. Melvin is such a popular figure.
Right. I produced a video on WHUR back in 1991 as we were celebrating our 20th anniversary.
Yes.
And I produced a short video documentary on the station.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the persons that I interviewed, one of my talking heads, was Melvin. And I asked him to tell the Quiet Storm story. Yes. And I wish we had a clip of that now, but I'll have to paraphrase it. Melvin said that Melvin was a business student at the time at Howard University. He was working at HUR in some capacity, in some internship capacity. And he may very well have been working in Kathy Hughes' office. I'm not sure about that fine detail. But right. he was an intern working at the station. Mm-hmm. And for one reason or another, Kathy, and this is Melvin speaking. Sure. Kathy came to Melvin and said, "Melvin, I need you to go on the air." And it was a Saturday night, and she said, "I need you to go on the air." And Melvin thought to himself, he said, "You know, he wanted to learn more things about advertising and marketing, and he really didn't have any idea or desire to be a DJ."
Right.
But Kathy came to him and said, "Melvin, I need you to go on the air." So at the time, HUR's format was pretty much jazz formatted. I mean, we played R&B, we played gospel, we played blues, and other genres of music, but there was a lot of jazz influence on HUR's program. So anyhow, so typically we'd be playing jazz from 7 to midnight. And Melvin said, well, he didn't really know a whole lot about jazz, and he wasn't going to get on the air and try to fool people into thinking that he knew something about jazz. So he said, what should I do? I'll just play some nice, soft, love music.
Yeah.
But he didn't know how to run the board. He didn't know how to push the buttons on the audio console and all of that.
Right.
So he had a friend of his named Jack Schuler they were students together at Howard. Mm-hmm. And Jack knew how to do the production stuff. Right. So we got Jack to go in and run the board, and the Quiet Storm was born. Actually, the first artist that he played on his first show was Grover Washington, and I can't think of the name of the song offhand. But anyhow, Melvin did his show, and he said, and here again, I'm paraphrasing the video that I produced.
Cool, sure.
The interview I did with Melvin back in '91, and he said when he got off the air, he got a call from Kathy, and Kathy said, Melvin, it was a great performance. She said, you hit me like a storm, like a quiet storm. Mm. And as Melvin tells it, as he tells the story, so he gave it the inspiration, Kathy gave it the name. Uh-huh. But what's equally as important is when HUR came on the air in 1971, although we were a commercially licensed radio station, we were very progressive. Yeah. We spent a lot of time with news and public affairs and information, a good mix of music, as I said just a minute ago, jazz and gospel and blues and Caribbean music and African music, and R&B and all of it. It was that's why one of our first monikers was 360 degrees of blackness, or 360 degrees of the black experience, because musically and in terms of news and information and music, we did cover the diaspora.
Yes.
So we were very progressive back then in the early days, but if you looked at some Arbitron ratings that you spoke of earlier in our conversation when you were talking about promoting
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson.
Right.
If you look at, and I've got a sheet of that data. If you look at the Arbitron ratings back in the early days, unfortunately, even though we had interesting, new, progressive black radio programming, the ratings were like that because we were narrowcasting, we were niche broadcasting, and the ratings were like that. But in 1976, when Melvin came on the air with that Quiet Storm, and the minute he hit the airways of the Quiet Storm, the phone started popping, and listeners started flocking to HUR in the evenings, to listen to this Quiet Storm and this new guy, Melvin Lindsay.
Yeah.
You know, had this cool, smooth,
Yeah.
suave voice,
Yeah.
and it all worked.
And didn't speak much.
No, and he said that in the interview.
Part of his magic,
He
man.
said that in the interview. He said, you know, I didn't talk over the records.
Yeah.
You know, I just played the music and
Right.
put my head in there when it was time to take a quick break, and I was gone. But he laid down the magic. And if you're getting back to those ratings, if you look at those Arbitron ratings starting around 1976, 77, all of a sudden,
Yes.
they start going up. And we were talking about Kathy. Under her watch, you know, I think, this is my opinion, I think that was in 1976, that's when HUR really catapulted into being a general market station.
Yes.
And not this niche kind of specialized
sleepy, yeah.
broadcast. We jumped into the mainstream, and it was primarily because of Quiet Storm in '76, and then I came along in '79, 3 years later.
Right.
And while we're talking about ratings, can I tell you another little quick story?
Oh, please do.
I came along in 1979, right? And that's another whole story of how I wound up being on the radio playing gospel music. But suffice it to say,
You know we want to get all up in it. Right?
Okay. But
when we come back from break.
Okay, but suffice it to say, on Sunday, May 27, 1979, I signed on the air playing gospel music. And about 18, so I'm playing music. I had been a producer for 7 years before I went on the air. Right. So I went on the air, and after I got comfortable with, you know, being on the air, live radio, microphone, all of that stuff, after I got comfortable with the mechanics, you know, then my creative skills started kicking in, my producing skills started kicking in, started to add a little more of my personality to the show. So about 18, we're getting back to Arbitron and ratings.
Sure.
The Quiet Storm in '76 ratings go up. So maybe 18 months or so after I'd been on the air with Gospel Spirit, and a guy named Ron Chote, he's passed on now. He's one of our sales reps, and he walked to my office one morning. He said, "Patrick," he had this Arbitron sheet, you know,
Right.
and he said, "Patrick," he said, "look at this," and I said, "What?" And it was this bar graph, okay,
Right.
of these ratings.
Yeah.
And HUR Sunday morning, 6 to 11, was at the top of the page.
Yeah.
And here's the bar graph, and the bar ran and fell off the edge of the page.
Hello.
And I said, "What's this mean?" And he said, "It means that all these people are listening to you."
Yeah.
And I said, you know, I couldn't believe it that
Right.
all these people were listening to me. And actually, you know, prior to that, the sales department didn't sell spots, didn't sell commercials during gospel music time. Prior me.
Right.
They just, I don't know. I guess they were kind of spooky. They thought
Yeah,
that.
so it kind of was a wasteland.
it's
Ultimately, it was a
but-
commercial wasteland.
Right.
But when Patrick Ellis came in and those ratings started to fall off the page,
And-
no, they jumped off the page.
Jumped off the page.
Yeah.
And,
then
and
the cash register started ringing.
the cash register started ringing.
We're going to make the cash register ring over here at the Rock Newman Show today, Saturday, September the 21st. I want to, before we go to this break, in case I forget it when we come back, I want to say it before we go because I'm thinking about it right now. I have a new puppy, the first puppy I've ever had in all my days. So I want to shout out to my wife, Dee Dee, who's taking care of Monty. And also I want to say happy birthday to the former Ivia Glodine Brooks, who was my first girlfriend. I always remember today is her birthday also. We'll be back to the Rock Newman Show in just a few moments.
This is Leprechaun Tim Pohanka from Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai. It's hard to be down on your luck when you're Virginia's first choice for new Nissan and Hyundais, but I need to sell 60 cars this week. Right now, I'll pay you big bucks for your good luck. Bring down any good luck charm you've gotten based on the sale price of the car you choose. I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car this week. Today, your lucky penny is worth plenty, up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car you want. Stop moping and hoping you'll get approved. With my For the People credit approval process, the banks are looking to get lucky and lend to you, even if you've been turned down before. Bring me any good luck charm and I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car today. Hurry, once I get rid of 60 cars, the luck runs out. All offers require bank approval, so call us at 1-800-POHANKA, visit Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai on Route 1 in Fredericksburg, or better yet, log on to timpohankaforthepeople.com. And when we make a deal, I promise it'll be your lucky day. I'm Tim Pohanka, and I'm a leprechaun for the people.
Hello to all my friends in the DMV. I am Rock Newman from the Rock Newman Show. I want to tell you about the MGM Grand National Harbor, the most exciting project to come to the District, Maryland, or Virginia in quite some time. You're going to have great fun. Come on down, support this project with all you have. It is going to be wonderful for the area. We're going to increase our tax base. We're going to get funding for the police department, for ambulance, for fire, for education. It is really a project that is going to benefit our area. Folks, we want to support in a very strong DMV kind of way this great project from the MGM Grand National Harbor.
And now, The Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back to the Rock Newman Show in this fabulous place called Busboys and Poets. We are on the stage of the Langston Hughes Room, and as I kind of look over my shoulder there and see the folks dining on this delectable Busboys and Poets food, I want to invite you all down. Come down and have a great breakfast and join the conversation. My guests in this segment is Patrick Ellis, the legendary host of Gospel Spirit on WHUR 96.3. He's HUR has been in business for 42 years now, and Patrick has been the host of the Sunday Morning Gospel Show for more than 60 years. Patrick, I know earlier in the program, for those folks who are maybe just tuning in, you said you were at your, I think, sister-in-law's place, and she was working at HUR, and she said, hey, come on down and, host the show. You at the time, what were you doing at the time?
In 71?
In when your sister-in-law told you to come down and sort of co-host this thing in 76. How did Patrick Ellis really get started in this, and what was your previous background?
My previous background, actually prior to 71, I was working as a librarian in the federal. No, I was in private industry at that time, Gillette Research Institute. And I had thought back in the late '60s that it might be cool to work in radio. In 1965, WOL, the call letters had been in D.C. for years, but the format changed up in 1965, and WOL hit the air, raising OL, as Bobby Bennett used to say,
right.
and Carol Henson and all of that crew.
The Nighthawk.
The Hawk, the Nighthawk was over there. He eventually came to HUR.
Yes.
You know, he was the first jock on HUR to spin a record when we signed on.
The Nighthawk was?
Yeah.
Really? I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was the first jock on the air when we signed on in 1971, December 10th. And the first commercial song he played, I think the first song HUR actually played was Lift Every Voice and Sing. But the first commercial record that followed after that was the theme from Shaft, and Bob Nighthawk Terry was on the turntable.
Right.
Anyhow, going back to the 60s,
Sure.
OL was a hot urban station, as they call it nowadays.
Absolutely.
And I was impressed, and Dewey Hughes was a producer over there, and they did a segment. They did a segment called War on Slums, and they used to encourage their listeners to write in, call in, and tell them about bad conditions in housing where they were living.
Sure, slum landlords.
Slum landlords and all that stuff.
Right.
And the people would go to the station, and the station would get on the air and bust the landlords out,
Right.
and the stuff would get fixed.
Right.
And I thought that was pretty cool. So I just, called Dewey Hughes, and he said, come on down to the station. I talked with him. He said, I'd like to hire you as an assistant. Long story short, that didn't work out.
Right.
So it was in the 60s. I thought I might like this radio. So fast forward a few years in HUR, Kay, my sister-in-law at the time, asked me to come in, and the rest is kind of sort of history. But in terms of how I got into this gospel business, okay, I guess we can say I grew up in the Episcopal Church in the 40s, okay? In the 50s.
Sure.
And, they ain't playing no gospel music in the
Right.
Episcopal Church back then.
Right.
So it was in the early 60s, and I used to travel to New York to visit which wasn't my sister-in-law then, but, my girlfriend's sister. I used to travel to New York on weekends sometimes, and she and her husband would always make sure that we had some kind of cultural experience while we were there in Manhattan.
Okay.
And so we went there one weekend, and they said, what do y'all want to do this weekend? And we go, I don't know. And they said, you want to go hear some gospel music? And we said, well, sure, okay. They said, well, Shirley Caesar and the Caravans are playing at the Apollo Theater. And it turns out also on the bill was Reverend Cleophas Robinson and a group called the Gospelayers out of Dayton, Ohio. Because remember, I told you in the Episcopal Church, we didn't know anything about black gospel music.
Like the Catholic Church that I grew up in.
Okay, there you go.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Sure.
we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And so I go to the Apollo Theater, and I remember especially when this quartet, the Gospelers, came on stage. Man, and these cats had drums and guitars and all that. And I'm like, whoa, what is this? But that was my first introduction to gospel music, although I really didn't know much about it, but I appreciated it.
Right.
And I guess I kind of tucked it into one of my memory chips.
Sure.
Because that was back in the early 60s.
Yeah.
And then fast forward almost 15 years later, and I get an opportunity to host Gospel Spirit on HUR. The program director came to me and said, Patrick, I've always wanted you to be on the air. He said, why don't you come in on Sunday mornings and play some gospel music? Because the station had always played gospel music, but they were looking for a new host. Because the guy used to do it, I think he was leaving or something like that. So the PD came to me and said, I want you to go on the air and play gospel music. And I said, you want me to do what? You want me to come on the air on a Sunday morning and play gospel music? He said, yeah. I said, well, I don't know. I said, I thought about it, and I said, maybe it would be a good professional challenge because I've been a producer kind of behind the scenes for 7 years. This would be an opportunity to be on the live show, audience, all of that. And I thought, and I said, maybe I'll do it. So I went back to the PD and I said, okay, I'll do it, but you got to give me 30 days because I got to do some quick homework on this gospel music thing.
Right.
And so I spent the next 30 days. I mean, I would go to, went to the music library, got more familiar with, the gospel records they had there on the shelves, and I went around to church bookstores. And I'd look in the bins, and I'd ask some of the customers coming in, what are you here to buy? And I'd talk to the clerks and say, what's hot?
Yeah.
And then a good friend of mine named Vernice Watson, who's a record promoter, took me up to a little shop up on 14th and Randolph Streets, Northwest, right up the street here.
Right
so
up
we're,
from
we're
here,
at 14th
right.
and V, right up the street a little bit.
Sure.
The guy's name was Clarence. And Clarence had a shoe repair and a record store business.
He was an entrepreneur.
Right. Well, what happened was when he was locked up, he learned how to repair shoes. Okay. So when he got out, he started a business, and he had a shoe shop in the back and a record store in the front.
Hold on, folks. This is where you get this kind of information right here on the Rock Newman Show as to how Gospel Spirit, the most popular program on Sunday morning in all of Washington, D.C. radio got started. We're talking right now 14th and Randolph up there. What was his name?
Clarence.
Up at Clarence's house. Because once Clarence got out the joint, he got his right and his real hustle on.
Right.
And he started repairing shoes, but he also had
Gospel records.
Some gospel
But
records.
he had
This is where you get this information, right here.
He had R&B records and stuff too, but he had a section in his record store with gospel stuff. So Vernice took me up there and introduced me to Clarence, and then I would go, periodically. I'd go up to Clarence's, and I'd say, "What you been selling, man?" He said, "Man, this new song is hot.
Yeah.
This new one here is hot."
Right.
And he said, "You got the new James Cleveland album?" I said, "No." He said, "Here, take this one."
Now, was that going up yonder?
No, that was going up yonder was Walter Hawkins.
Okay, that shows.
But that was right about.
I love it, but I ain't an expert like you.
But that was right about the same time.
Right.
So he started introducing me to some of the music, the artists, and so forth. Because at the time, I hadn't established connections with the record labels by then. So Clarence really played an important part in my education.
And if y'all wouldn't listen to the Rock Newman Show, y'all wouldn't know that. Y'all wouldn't know what an important role Clarence played.
He played an important role in my professional development because there was that cat in the record store that was turning me on to the music and kind of leading the way and holding my hand and showing me,
Good stuff.
until I got on my feet and started, going for myself. So that's how it got started in 1979. And like I said earlier, once I got comfortable with the mechanics, there's a guy named Tom Gager who used to be an announcer at WMAL AM radio, and he did middays, and back in the 60s and the 70s. And shortly after I went on the air at HUR with Gospel Spirit, I called Gager one day and I said, "Do you mind if I just come to your show and just sit in and watch you work?" And he said, "No, sure." So I came up there to MAL and I sat there through his show and just watched him work, And when it was all over and I was about to leave, and he said something that stuck with me for the rest of my life in broadcasting. He said, "You'll be fine once you get comfortable with the medium." Once you get comfortable with the medium, he said, "You'll be fine." And I found that worked.
What did you understand that to mean?
I understood that to mean, and I understand that now after 36 years on the air, once you got comfortable with the medium, once you got comfortable with these microphones and these headsets and these cameras and these producers and these engineers and the whole bit, this is TV and it's a little more complicated and involved than radio. But anyhow, it's all basically the same. But once you get comfortable with the medium and comfortable, especially comfortable with the medium in the sense that here we are broadcasting, and out there's an audience, and you got to get comfortable to the point where you can forget about all these mics and cameras and all this kind of stuff. You can forget about all that stuff because you're comfortable at that point, and then you can get at ease and get comfortable to talk with the peeps, to talk with the people, and that's what that's what Gager meant. And it took, I don't know, a year or so until finally, I played this kind of trick on myself when I first got on the air, okay? And here we go. I imagine that there's this room, kind of like a big sunroom, with floor-to-ceiling windows and lots of nice natural light flowing in. And we got this nice spread of food laid out here, and I just invited a whole bunch of friends of mine, you and Mark and Twana and some other good friends, to come on over and look. We're gonna come on over and sit in this beautiful sunroom with all this nice, comfortable, gushy furniture, and we're gonna eat some good food, and we're gonna listen to some gospel music. Okay, so that's the audience. This is in my mind. That's the audience. And then this microphone. Before I got comfortable, this microphone is I imagine this microphone as being a set of French doors.
Yeah.
So when it's time to go in the air, it's like, okay, I'm going to open these French doors, and I'm going to step into this room with all my friends, this pretty room with all my friends, and this good food, and we're just going to sit around and listen to some gospel music.
Right.
And that's kind of sort of how I psychologically, I don't know, tricked myself until it finally got to the point where I did become comfortable with the medium.
Good.
And
And the rest is history.
and the rest is history.
Hey, you're talking about history. You have a story that I've heard in the past, and it's about Tommy Dorsey.
Okay.
And, you know, we have gospel music now. This time is going by so fast. We're going to have to take you over into one more segment. We're going to hold you hostage here. We're going to, beg the indulgence of our next guest. We've got to take you over for one more segment.
Okay.
But gospel music today is much, much different. In many ways, there are some similarities,
Right.
but it's much different
Right.
than times past. Tommy Dorsey, who was a jazz blues musician, came into gospel,
Right.
but he wasn't particularly embraced by the church folks
correct.
when he first came in. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
about
we
that
were talking about that earlier. Thomas A. Dorsey and his most famous legacy is he wrote the song "Take My Hand, Precious Lord."
Take my hand, precious Lord. Y'all know anything about that?
Right, and he wrote that song. If I'm not mistaken, it was maybe in the late 20s, possibly the early 30s, but somewhere in there.
Sure.
And he wrote the song "Take My Hand, Precious Lord." Well, he had actually been like a blues singer, and he sang with Ma Rainey and singing in little honky-tonk joints and stuff like that. So back then, that song, as crazy as it might seem, back then, that song, "Take My Hand, Precious Lord," that was kind of like on the edge. And the church
So
people...
it's frowned upon, like too progressive. Where you going with this?
Exactly, right, exactly.
Wow.
It was frowned upon. It was too progressive. What are you talking? Where are you going with this? And so that was back in the late 20s, maybe early 30s, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And then if you jump ahead to May of 1969,
Yes.
and here comes Edwin Hawkins and the Edwin Hawkins Singers and "Oh Happy Day."
Oh, my.
"Oh Happy Day," and the church people were like, "Oh Lord, oh
When
my."
Jesus was.
But that's too.
Yeah.
That just like they thought of Dorsey back. This is just too progressive here. They kind of frowned on that.
Right.
And some of the black radio stations, I guess the ones who were playing gospel, they wouldn't play that song. They thought it was too progressive, too outside. Until the pop stations started playing it, because it became a pretty big hit on the pop side of radio.
Right.
But here again, just like Reverend Wyatt T. Walker, back in the I guess the 70s, and he was emceeing, introducing the Dixie Hummingbirds at a concert. So before he brought them on, he gave the audience a little mini lecture, I guess you'd say, on the history of gospel music. And he was talking about Edwin Hawkins and Edwin Hawkins Singers and "Oh Happy Day." And he said, and Edwin Hawkins came along, and he added a few jazz riffs and a little bossa nova beat to it, and people basically rejected it, until it became popular on the pop radio scene. So there's that, and then you jump up to the early 1990s, and here comes Kirk Franklin and Stomp. Here comes Kirk Franklin and Stomp. And initially, the church people were like, "Whoa, wait a minute!
Yeah, they're gone too far.
Right, you've gone too far." So you can see the progression from Thomas A. Dorsey to Edwin Hawkins and there's a pattern there, and there's something to be said about that as
something to be said about you being a legend and us having to take this break. And we're going to come back. Patrick Ellis has agreed to stay over one segment. Going into the next hour, we'll be back in just a few moments with all things good on the Rock Newman Show at Busboys and Poets, 14th and V Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. Come join us.
Hello to all my friends in the DMV. I am Rock Newman from the Rock Newman Show. I want to tell you about the MGM Grand National Harbor, the most exciting project to come to the District, Maryland, or Virginia in quite some time. You're going to have great fun. Come on down, support this project with all you have. It is going to be wonderful for the area. We're going to increase our tax base. We're going to get funding for the police department, for ambulance, for fire, for education. It is really a project that is going to benefit our area. Folks, we want to support in a very strong DMV kind of way this great project from the MGM Grand National Harbor.
My baby drives a handcuff.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a handcuff.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Welcome back, folks. Today, Saturday morning, September the 21st, 2013. Guest in studio with us, the legendary Patrick Ellis from Gospel Spirit, WHUR 96.3's award-winning Sunday morning show. Coming up in the next hour is going to be Rico Newman. Rico Newman is a gentleman, for in sense of full disclosure, is my first cousin, and he has done research for 40 years now on a variety of things: Native American history, the history of people that have been referred to as Brandywine people, a real historian on the area of D.C., Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, Piscataway people, There's much for us to talk about. I don't want to give up too much. I want to have him sitting here describing all that is to be learned and that you need to know and that you should be informed about what is a rich and complex history of folks from the Washington, D.C. area who have been often confused, misunderstood, maligned, but a proud people nevertheless. It is will be a fascinating interview about race and racism and the struggle for identity from many in our community. So Rico Newman coming up at the next hour, but we're going to wrap up with this segment with Patrick Ellis, the legend. Patrick, I mentioned earlier when you said Going Up Yonder, and that was by
Edwin Hawkins.
That was by
Edwin Hawkins
Singers.
Right.
Probably my favorite gospel song is by James Cleveland.
Okay.
And he talks about, he has this prologue about the family going down the road on the dark highway, and there's an accident. And there's an accident, and they go and they knock on this door. And the white lady comes and answers.
Oh, okay.
The white lady comes.
Come on in the room.
And answers, come on in the room.
Right.
And the grandma comes in eventually after the son there is, they don't think he's going to make it. And he says, do you have a closet?
Do you have a
she said,
closet?
well, I've got a telephone. You can call the doctor. But she said, I want a closet. And grandma goes in that closet and she calls on the master doctor.
Right.
That is. I find that such an interesting and and you know what? Whether or not it's a true story doesn't really matter.
Right.
It's such an
message.
inspirational story with such an incredibly uplifting and hopeful message.
Right.
Now, you've been in this gospel music world for a long time.
Okay.
Can you pick a favorite?
No.
So is it to you like saying pick a favorite child?
Sort of, kind of, yeah. Sort of, kind of.
So I can't get you.
They're to me, I mean, there's so many, and they're almost all favorites because the music that I picked to play, for the show are all my favorites. You know?
You love it all.
I love it all. And when I'm listening to new music, look, I'm listening for 6 things, and they all hinge on quality. So I'm looking for the quality of the lyrics, the melody, the arrangement, the musicianship, the vocals, and the production.
You know what, Patrick? For my viewing audience and listening audience later on tonight on 1480 AM, I would like you as the host and longtime host of the #1 gospel show in the world is what I'm going to say it is. That's what it is. It's the #1 gospel show in the world. I'd like for you to go through those 6 elements one more time because what you do has made your show great. So what are those 6 elements again?
Okay, here we go. And they all hinge on quality.
Each of them have to have their own strong quality.
Correct.
And they are?
Lyrics, melody, arrangement, production, musicianship, and vocals.
Okay.
That's all 6 of them. So, for example, let me give you a real quick example. And this is going through my mind while I'm listening to music.
Sure.
I've been doing it for so long now, I don't have to sit and say, okay, now I'm listening for lyrics. Now, you know, it's kind of like second nature to me.
Right.
So I put a new disc on, I spin a new disc. When I'm auditioning music, to make a decision as to what I'm going to put on the air. And this all goes back to what's your favorite gospel song.
Sure.
So as I'm listening, here's just one example. You got a song, and it's got great lyrics, good melody to it. The production was on it. You know, they had good production facility. The musicians are on top of everything. But guess what? The singers, they just can't sing. And it ruins they just can't sing.
Won't work.
Like Randy would say on Idol, it's a little pitchy.
Sure.
Just can't hold a note.
Sure.
So it spoils everything. So all of those 6 criteria have got to come up on a scale of, 1 to 10. All of them need to at least be a 5. So anyhow, when I'm listening to the music, and and something tickles my ear, something touches my soul,
Yeah.
then the first thing I think is, they're going to like this. Meaning the audience.
Sure,
They're
sure.
going to like this.
Right.
Why? Because I like it.
Yeah.
You know, and,
Yeah.
and they and I are one with all this experience. I say to myself, they're going to like this. And, you know, a lot of times I'm right.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm wrong.
Okay, let me ask you this. I can't get you to commit to what a favorite one was,
Right.
and I kind of understand that. Let me.
I mean, how do I pick a favorite from
gazillion?
Roscoe Robinson with the Five Blind Boys of Alabama singing Tears from Water, which is one of my favorites,
Yeah.
you know, to Richard Smallwood singing any number of his songs, and Kirk Franklin singing some of his music, you know,
Sure.
Why We Sing and Stomp and
Smile and
Smile, and you know, I just can't pick one favorite.
So let me ask you this.
Okay.
I remember riding along Benning Road past RFK Stadium.
Okay.
And this must have been 1971 or so. And rarely do I ever hear a song the first time and fall in love with it.
Okay.
But I heard this voice, and it was Bobby Womack, and he was singing Harry Hippie.
Okay.
And I fell in love with the song the first time I heard it. One other was Roberta Flack, Howard University graduate,
Right.
singing The First Time I Ever Saw Your Face. I remember those two songs, and more recently, I remember Alicia Keys singing her singing her signature song, which I can't even remember what it is right now. What was that? What Alicia Keys' first major hit was? Somebody's going to tell me in a moment. I can't think of it right now.
Okay.
Falling. I keep on falling. So those songs I heard, and they hit me, and they stuck with me, and I knew I was going to I loved them then, and I loved them, you know, as they played out. Anything that you remember that kind of hit you, knocked your socks off right soon as you heard it for the first time, you knew it was going to be something special?
Whoa, you asked me these tough questions. Gee, I mean, I don't know. I mean, one of them I could pick would be, Andre Crouch and We Need to Hear From You, or Edwin Hawkins and Oh Happy Day.
Yeah.
You know.
When you heard that, I mean, man,
Right,
that was
right.
such, I mean, Oh Happy Day. You know, I understand you said, you know, from a historical perspective.
Right.
The church folks and some of the gospel music stations frowned upon it, but man, it
Right,
made Oh Happy
right,
Day made
right.
you pat your foot, you know, made
Right.
you clap your hands.
When
you
I
know?
came on the air in 1979, we were right at that point in the evolution of gospel music, where contemporary gospel music was starting to come on board, so to speak. You know, we had Edwin Hawkins, '69. That was a little earlier, but then Andre Crouch was coming on the scene, and the Winans were coming on the scene. We're starting to hear more and more of this quote-unquote contemporary gospel music. And I remember when I came on the air in '79, it was, you know, kind of a controversy from the traditionalists who was saying, well, this really isn't gospel music, because you listen to BB and CC Winans, and they never say Jesus, and they never say God. They talk about you, and that's not really gospel. So there was this controversy going on about the time that I came on the air. And of course, now contemporary gospel music is pretty much universally accepted.
Folks, Patrick is a very busy man, and he does, you know, fun and important stuff on the weekend. So I'm going to let you in on a little inside secret. I've been trying to get Patrick on for quite some time now. And, you know, he's very, very gentle and kind in saying, well, I can't come on, I can't come on. I'll tell you what happened. Probably 3 weeks or so ago, I'm listening on Sunday morning. I'm going out to the fruit stand to get some watermelon.
Right.
And I hear, and I don't know who it is, but I hear Bridge Over Troubled Waters. And if I'm not mistaken, it ended up being Mary J. Blige.
Correct.
And
Andre Bocelli. Right.
Man, that thing was cracking on Sunday morning. And I called Patrick, and I got him, and we finally agreed to do it. Now, that Bridge Over Troubled Waters, for example, is not considered, it's probably not in the gospel column.
No.
You know?
But like I say on my show, a lot of times I say, you know, once in a while we color outside the lines.
Yeah.
You know, it's not gospel music, but
Yeah.
it's certainly inspirational.
Right.
So, you know, yeah, we play Bridge Over Troubled Waters by Mary J. Blige and Andre Bocelli. And we play, right about now, people are stuck on Michael Jackson, Gone Too Soon.
Yeah.
I started playing that song. I mean, it's an old song
Sure,
now
sure.
from his Dangerous CD. But I started playing that song, I don't know, maybe like last fall.
Yeah.
And it caught on.
Yeah.
And now it's like week after week after week, people just want to hear Gone Too Soon. So it's not gospel at all, but
Yeah.
it's sure, you know, an inspirational song.
And Patrick, you know, when I used that word legend earlier, and you sort of reacted not particularly comfortable with the term, and that's a that's a God-given grace.
I'm cool with it. It's just
I understand. There's humility that creates a little discomfort, but part of what goes into the reason why I define you as a legend, because on Sunday mornings, you have provided an outlet and a place. You know, after a funeral, folks have a repast.
Right.
And it's where they come to fondly remember and eat and tell stories about the departed. And they always say, let's not wait this long to get together again.
Right.
And what you afford the Washington, D.C. community, and now with the advent of satellite radio, what you afford people around the world every week is to have a repast, is to, when I hear you talk about the letters that come in from relatives who are honoring and remembering those that have gone past, it seems as if you sort of being a clearinghouse for people to grieve, for people to purge, for people to share uplifting comments is something that, I just know as a fan. I'm a straight up fan, groupie, damn near got a man crush on you and all you do. Man, take care of yourself. Keep on doing what you're doing for another 36 years, because what you do for this community is truly invaluable. And may God bless you, and thank you so much for coming on the Rock Newman Show.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you.
All right. Folks, we'll be back with Rico Newman coming up on the Rock Newman Show today, Saturday, September the 21st, 2013. See you soon.
My baby drives a Pohanka cup.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a Pohanka cup.
Hello, everybody. I'm Rock Newman from The Rock Newman Show. And I am absolutely flattered to have as one of my fine advertisers the DMV's greatest corporate citizen. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about the Pohanka Automotive Group. If you have any automotive needs whatsoever, if you want to sell your car, buy a car, trade in your car, have your car serviced, whatever you need, see my good friends at the Pohanka Automotive Group. You will be well taken care of, I promise. I'm Rock Newman. I might be there. Come on down and see our good friends at Pohanka Automotive Group.
And now, The Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back to this segment of the Rock Newman Show. I think that our subject matter and our guest in this finishing segment today is going to be fascinating. It certainly is fascinating to me. It's fascinating in part because I want to talk about a history that to some extent I have been a part of, that my family has been a part of, a history that I have lived, and a history that I'm, not so very familiar with in terms of research, in terms of real documentation, in terms of understanding a lineage of my history and my family's history, which really is a microcosm of American history. I have said, obviously, one of the mortal sins of America has been racism. And there's so much to talk about that. Racism, in part, at its core, is, in the context of which we talk today, is about white supremacy. And so much of what our country has had to grapple with to try to come together as one. For those of you who may be unaware, the Rock Newman Show tagline, our theme, is "We Are One." And I had a guest on, and he said that is such a wonderful theme. It's such a great tagline. But we have yet grown to where we truly are one. And from this microphone right here and these cameras and what we do here at Busboys and Poets is every day, every conversation, we strive to make the world a little better place when we can, and we can. It all starts with the man in the mirror. And so we bring today a subject matter for some has been an incredible sense of blossoming pride. For some, it has been ridiculed. For some, there has been the comments that, there are all forms. There are myriad forms of denial. There is the uplifting story of truly identifying heritage, lineage, and ancestry. So at those multiple crossroads, I am absolutely honored to have my guests. And I do want to say, by disclaimer, so you understand, this next guest happens to be a highly informed, very well-researched individual. He also happens to be my first cousin. My name is Rock Newman, and this is the Rock Newman Show, and I want to welcome Rico Newman to the Rock Newman Show. Rico, thank you very much for coming on here today. Man, I posted on Facebook as we do some of the marketing and the promotion of the Rock Newman Show, and I said, the families, Savoys, Proctors, Newmans, Butlers, I know I left out some Swans, Harleys, and I'm still leaving out some.
Thompsons, Masons.
Thompsons, Masons, those Grays for sure. Those of you who are in that family group, and I loosely identified the group as Brandywine people, as what's called Brandywine people. Now let me explain something to those of you that are watching who may not be aware. Brandywine people is a term that was used by someone, and maybe Rico can tell me who that is, because I don't really know. Like I said, I'm much less aware of much of the history than many people are. But we're going to find out today here on the Rock Newman Show. Brandywine people are a group of people that were light for what I understood and knew for many, many years, were light-skinned blacks that lived in the Brandywine area, but not just Brandywine, Clinton, Waldorf, Charles County, St. Mary's County, other parts of Maryland. And then there are certainly other populations and pockets of individuals around the country, somewhat similar. But I want to bring this up early in this discussion because we want to deal with and sort of uncover and peel back the layers on all that surrounds this particular subject. And I want to bring up a term because it helps identify something I've read recently, because I really just looked at this stuff, that this particular term at some point in time has been characterized as a slur, almost like a slur. But it is a term that I want to bring up to help identify the subject that we're talking about. And the term is called we sorts. Have you ever heard? Maybe you have not. Early on in my life, I heard that term. I first heard that term from my maternal grandfather, who was the only grandparent that I knew. And one day he was explaining something. I had asked a question. I made an observation, Rico. I went to St. Michael's Church, and I'm probably 5 or 6 years old at the most. St. Michael's Church in Baden, Maryland. And I looked, and white people were sitting in the front of the church, as I knew it. Light-skinned people were sitting in the middle of the church, and dark-skinned people were sitting in the back of the church. And somewhere at an early age, that just sort of fascinated me. I was like, wow. And of course, I got smacked because I went up and sat with the white folks. I sat with the folks in the middle, and I also went back and sat with the folks in the back. And I was like, what is wrong with you? Whatever. Okay. So my grandfather explained to me that I should never do that again because I was a we sort. He told me I was a we sort. And I was like, well, the hell is a we sort? And so he said, it's like, we're not like those people sitting in the front, and we're not like those people sitting in the back. So we're not like those white people, and we're not like those black people. We are we sorts. We are, and at the time, all I knew and all I heard and what I understood was light-skinned blacks. Now, as we introduce this subject, when we talk about white supremacy, when we talk about racism, when we talk about the struggle for equality, the impact, the incredible impact of racism has been something that has denied many, many parts of the population equal access, equal opportunity, and all the rest. And it put an incredible, I think, created a negative mindset amongst many. I say that to say my maternal grandfather, we called him Papa. He was as biased towards a dark-skinned black as the most racist Ku Klux Klansman. Now, the fascinating thing is, as I clearly remember, he also had real issues and sort of an intolerance and just a palpable dislike for white folks. So he didn't like white people and he didn't like black people, it seemed like. So, you know, it's much to try to figure out. Okay, Rico, you got until 12 o'clock to explain all of this. What the hell is going on?
Thank you very much. Oh, okay.
Well, first of all, again, thank you so much for coming in. And you have been doing a lot of research for a long time. You were a spokesperson and speaking for the Piscataway Conococheague tribe. We'll get into all of that. What I'd like to ask you is, what was it that prompted you to start doing the research that has brought you to today?
Well, to use a tagline as you started out in that, which is a very good way to label things, to know where you're going. Having worked with a lot of anthropologists, I kind of picked up on their tagline, which is, how do we know what we know?
How do we know what we know?
And that requires you to start looking back into the past, doing some searching, doing some researching, pulling out a lot of old primary documents, trying to determine who made these decisions that put us where we are today. In doing that, it wasn't something that I started doing as a child because the first 30 years of my life were they went by in a flash. A lot of drama during those 30 years. But it started dawning on me as I aged, especially when I had children. You know, what do I tell my kids when they ask the same questions that I asked and I didn't get answers that I was looking for?
And those questions were?
Well,
that you asked?
Yeah, I would ask, because I grew up in Southeast Washington, 1 block from the Navy Yard, and what back then we called the projects.
Sure,
okay.
Sure.
Not a glamorous place to be. But I knew I was different, and I was treated different. You know, so I wanted to know why. You know, what is the difference between me and the kids I played with? And all my mother would say is, you're a child of God, and that's all that mattered. And if I asked my grandmother the same question, she'd put it off. Oh, it really doesn't matter. You're like everybody else. Well, I wasn't being treated like everybody else.
Now, Rico, you know, part of what I want to do is really kind of get into all of this, and you know, so that our listening audience can appreciate and understand what you've been through, what communities have been through, mm-hmm. and how you see the world, and how people perhaps that you speak for see the world. So when you say, I wasn't being treated like anybody else, mm-hmm. explain what that means.
Well, kids can be cruel. You know, they're probably more cruel than adults are with each other because kids are blunt and honest to the bone. The obvious was the difference in color. Uh-huh. So that was very often pointed out to me in such a way that it made me feel like, you know, something was wrong with me.
Mm-hmm. So now you grew up in the Southeast, you grew up in the projects, urban area, and when you went to school, did you go to segregated schools?
I went to Catholic school up by the Navy Yard, St. Cyprian's, which are Eastern
St. Cyprian?
St. Cyprian's.
And was that were the Catholic schools segregated? Cause,
Catholic schools were.
Okay, because I grew up. I went to a segregated elementary school, mm-hmm. so you did too.
Yes.
And the segregated elementary school that we went to was a black school, mm-hmm. and I had all black teachers, and you know the white kids went to the school. I went to Orem Elementary in Aquasco, Maryland. The white kids went to Brandywine Elementary in Brandywine. So now you're going to school with black kids, but you feel yourself being treated in sort of not the same as.
Yeah, it wasn't that it went unnoticed, because when we, not only myself and my sisters at this school, the nuns there talked with my parents and decided it might be in our best interest to come out of there, because the social arena that we were in was detrimental to our good health. We wound up going to an Indian boarding school in Pennsylvania. I kind of missed my sisters when they went because I was home alone. But I regretted going once I did get the opportunity to go there, and I was there from the age
And you were going because were you being mistreated? You feel you were being mistreated?
well, my parents got that idea that, and they were told by the school authorities that it was in our best interest to go there, to get out of that arena where we could grow.
Okay.
So from the age of, I think, 8 until 13, I was at that school. Anyway, moving fast forward, what started impressing me was when I had kids, and I would try to give them material to read. But the school had overwhelmed them with so much material. They said, you know, Dad, I would read this, but I'm going to get judged and graded on this material. So I could never get material in front of them for them to read. So it was being passed on that they weren't at an impressionable age to learn things about themselves. That was my first venture into getting information about who we are.
Okay, and so now so if I extrapolate, you're saying you've been doing research for 40 years, and you say so this was been when you were about 30 years old.
This is one of my 30s. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
and you had married at that time?
Yes.
Okay, and you started having some kids. You had kids who were school age. Now, in terms of who you married and what kind of what kids you produced, were they children who were of your color, a lighter color, a darker color?
my color.
Okay.
They went to Catholic school also. You know,
Okay.
it was, all of us, you know, we came up Catholic. We've been Catholic since the 1640s. Matter of fact, you trace that back, which in doing our genealogy, you go back 13 generations. It was our 13th generation mutual grandfather that was the first Indian baptized in the state of Maryland.
That was what?
Baptized.
You said the first Indian?
Yes.
So let me just hear this correctly, because you know I feel at such almost like a intimidated and at a great loss, but I am so incredibly curious. This is a part of my life that I simply been doing other stuff and haven't paid attention to, and so I am unaware. There's another word for that, and that is ignorant to these particular facts. So if I heard you right, you just said did you say paternal? Our paternal.
Paternal.
Our paternal grandfather, 13 generations back, was the first Indian that was baptized?
Yes.
As a Catholic, or?
Yes, as a Catholic. He was baptized by the Jesuit, Father John White. There's a stained glass window in St. Ignatius Church down on, I can't think of the name of the road, down near Port Tobacco, that has an image of him being baptized by Father John White. I can't think of the name of the road, but I will before the show is over. Chapel Road. Chapel Point Road.
Chapel Point.
Yeah, that's where the church is located.
And what part of Maryland is that?
It's going down 301 before you get to Captain Billy's. You make a right turn.
Okay, so roughly
Road.
Popes Creek, Maryland
Port
area.
Tobacco.
Port Tobacco. Okay,
Yeah.
Port Tobacco area.
Yeah.
Do you know what does it say what his name was?
His name was Kitamakwa.
What was it?
Kitamakwa,
Gitamakwa.
which means great beaver.
Great Beaver?
Great beaver.
Uh-huh.
Right.
So my great grandfather was named Gitamako. Kitamako.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I should say we've been, and most have been Catholic since then. It was so bad that during that period where Native identity was being lost in the early 18th century, some of what they call the riding ministers, those who got on their horses and went about proselytizing throughout the southern counties, reported back to what they call the C, and these were Protestant ministers, that they could convert the African readily, but the Indians would not hear of it. they were Catholic, although there were no Catholic ministers in the state at that time for a lot of political drama that was going on during the 18th century. But they still held on to that Catholicism in spite of the fact that there were no priests to administer to their faith. So Catholic is what we were all the way up until, I guess, the 1940s, 1950s, when a lot of people started questioning some of church dogma. A lot of people have abandoned the faith and have gone into other faiths or simply question, doubt Catholicism as a means of showing respect to that power greater than themselves. But what happened that really moved me into it was back in the 80s. There was an opportunity that was presented, and I'd been dabbling in real estate as an agent since '68, and I retired in 1988, right at the time that the great savings and loan debacle took place. All of these assets were out there that had to be gotten rid of, moved, sold. And I went to Philadelphia and participated in a project up there, and as a minority contractor, I would be promised a certain percentage of business. So I signed up, and I put down I was native. Well, I got a report back from the Resolution Trust Corporation that they could not accept me as a minority member for this project because I wasn't a member of an acknowledged tribe.
Okay, Rico, let me ask you this. So this is 1988. You were how old then?
Oh, 1988, I was 40.
Okay, so you're in your 40s then. Mm-hmm. At that point, you registered for some opportunity, and you registered as a native.
Right.
Okay. Was there a point that you started using native as opposed to colored, Negro, black, or did you never use those terms?
I'd always used it, but it was never accepted. If you went to the motor vehicles, if you went anywhere, hospital or clinic, anywhere, you put down native, they would scratch through it and either put other or colored. It just, native simply was not on it as a choice, as an identity.
Okay, so say for example, you went to this Catholic school and then you ended up going to a boarding school somewhere in Pennsylvania.
Right.
And you came back at 13 years old.
Right.
So at that time, earlier you had gone to the Catholic school, you had gone to the black school, you had gone to the colored Catholic school. So did you consider yourself then being colored? Did you just not know? Was that not a factor to you?
Well, when I came back from Pennsylvania, the last thing I wanted to be was an Indian. I mean,
was the last thing you wanted to be?
Wanted to be was Indian.
When you came back from Pennsylvania, last thing you wanted to be was an Indian.
Right.
Okay.
It's because the denigration, the stories that they would tell about Native people, and these were nuns telling these stories. You know, like you would shrink under the table. You know, so pretty soon, you were being indoctrinated that you did not want to be associated with something that was being described the way they were describing it.
Okay, so you coming from a colored Catholic school, going to a school in Pennsylvania. So I'm assuming you go from the colored Catholic school going up there thinking colored. We're colored kids coming into the school. You go up there and you get this education that totally denigrates Native Americans, it totally denigrates Indians. So you come back after being taken out of an environment that you were uncomfortable with because of the way you look, sort of your color. You go up there and, as you say, the one thing you know you don't want to be is an Indian. That must have been one hell of a time of confusion.
It was. You know, it wasn't that I abandoned it. It was like I wanted to make sure, because when I came back home, my folks had moved from Southeast out to Chapel Oaks, out by Fairmount Heights, which again was another black neighborhood.
Right.
And coming into this, I didn't know anybody. So now all kids want to fit in. They want to blend.
Sure.
So certainly I wasn't going to tell anybody anything that would now separate me from having friends. You know, everybody wants to be a part of something. So I wanted to fit in.
Sure.
So no, I didn't tell anybody that. You know, when people ask.
So you just behaved then as a member of the neighborhood like you were, and it was a predominantly Negro, black neighborhood.
Yeah.
So you just kind of went along to get along.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, this was before, I think a couple of years after I came back home, they built Fairmont Heights High School.
Right.
And there were a lot of kids being bused into the Fairmont Heights High School from Southern Maryland, you know, from the lower portions of Prince George County, particularly Brandywine. A lot of them were coming up to the school, and I knew a lot of them. And, you know, I felt the camaraderie, but they got on bus and went away. You know, there was no one around like me for me to identify with, to play with, to have some type of relationship with.
Right.
And it wouldn't be until I got in high school when I first got my first car, 1949 Ford convertible. You know that
warms your heart when you see them today.
Hey, player. So you know that kind of changed things for me because now I could get out. I could go down to Brandywine. I could go to Indian Head. I could actually get out and stretch out, you know, and start relating to people that I felt I could take a deep breath around. I didn't have to be secretive. I could express myself. You know, the places.
And these would just really kind of break all this stuff down, man. You had this 1949, what kind of car was it?
Ford.
1949 Ford convertible?
Yeah.
Damn, you really was playing in the day. Okay, so you would get in your 1949 Ford convertible and you would drive to these areas where there were predominantly other, call them what you will, and at the time, I'm not trying to define anybody, but this would, what I understood, you would move into these areas of light-skinned people.
Yeah, people that you felt that you had some camaraderie, some similarity with, that you could freely express what was going on. You didn't have to feel like I can't say this. You had to guard yourself against what you were going to say. I basically was dragged through all these places as a younger man because my mother would make sure I would go with my sisters the day they swear this never happened. But I was the blocker, as they call it.
You were what?
The blocker.
The mocker?
The blocker.
The blocker. The blocker. You was blocking them for your sister. Uh-huh.
So I would have to go with them when they went with their boyfriends to these clubs. You know, they went down to Can't Find It, Lucky Strike, Horseshoe Club, Pat and Gigi's, you know.
Moonlight Inn.
Moonlight Inn.
Folks, you're talking some history on the Rock Newman Show here now. Now let's run through those joints again. Pat and Gigi's,
Yeah.
Moonlight Inn,
Mm-hmm. Horseshoe Club.
Horseshoe Club.
Can't Find It.
Can't Find It. Can't Find It is Can't Find It was hard to find. It was a place hard to find. Okay.
Yeah, you had Lucky Strike. You had Proctor's Inns, Fords. You had a lot of places.
Let me ask you something. Proctor's Inn. Okay. I know there used to be a baseball field down by Proctor's Inn because I played there. It's kind of Proctor's Inn had played out. I'm 10 years your junior. Proctor's Inn had kind of played out by that time. So let me ask this. Was Proctor's Inn a place where a lot more Proctor's, Harleys, Newmans people were the lighter-skinned people than dark-skinned? Did not a lot of dark-skinned people come there?
Not initially. Not initially.
Okay.
Actually, when that started happening, and there was more drama around places like Moonlight Inn and Pat and Gigi's,
Right.
Where you had physical altercations.
Now, was that physical altercation between light-skinned people and dark-skinned people?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Okay, I mean, it is what it is. History is what it is, you know, and, you know, I'm not trying to make anything right or wrong. It's just fascinating. I didn't actually know that. So like at Pat and Gigi's, which to this day many people swear had the greatest barbecue in the history of barbecue, they also had like dance. You can kind of go down there, bear joint dance, that sort of thing.
Yeah, hand dancing was a thing. You know,
hand dancing.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there would be altercations based on sort of color line.
It was pretty much when somebody approached somebody's girlfriend.
Okay.
That would start it. And there were a lot of those. We had cousins that were involved in a lot of those altercations.
And was the sense there, just so I can understand, and I'm glad I'm doing this from a point of ignorance because I think, you know, I have questions to ask maybe that a lot of people are curious about.
Yeah.
So was the idea more during that time, sort of at a Pat and Gigi's, where would the altercations more come when light-skinned folks, it's kind of more of a place of light-skinned people, and I'm just using that term now just as a description, and that if a dark-skinned brother came over to talk to one of the light-skinned sisters? I ask that question because I know that in sort of my family history, I've heard the stories about maybe some of the light-skinned girls who would be so crazy to date some of the dark-skinned guys and how they were talked about badly.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It wasn't acceptable.
Right.
The generation.
White supremacy did an incredible,
Well,
crazy job.
you have to look at it in a historic sense. You look at the period of our grandfathers. Now, our grandfather, born in 1875. Imagine what the environment was for him and what was going on historically during his coming up.
We have the same paternal
Grandfather.
Grandfather. Okay, right. And his name was
John Baptist Newman.
Oh, John the Baptist Newman. Now, I've heard talk about him, but like I said, I only knew one grandparent. So, do we know the genealogy, the genetic makeup of John the Baptist Newman?
Yeah, it's pretty much across the board. You'll find it working its way through the entire family, both on my maternal and paternal side. You have cases where in the 1800s, the men who ruled, who predominated and controlled your ability to stay alive, meaning how were you going to eat, where were you going to sleep, were able to take advantage of women, and they did. And they left offspring. Every one of my great-grandmothers, without exception, bore a child by a white landowner without the benefit of marriage.
That's on your maternal side?
Both sides.
Both sides. Both sides. So,
yeah.
Okay. So, also on both sides, landowners, the white men,
The gentry, yes.
had offsprings with non-white women, whatever they were, whether the slave, the Indian, whatever it were, there were offsprings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not a lot has changed.
Yeah.
Men in power still take advantage.
Right.
But it was more available to them then because, I mean, what were you going to do? You know, you couldn't take them to court. You couldn't
There was no
sue.
recourse. There was absolutely no recourse. Another way of saying that, how, and a lot of people, I said this one time, and somebody questioned when I said George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were rapists. I said that. And I believe that. I believe that George Washington and the founding fathers of this country were rapists because what they did is they exploited the vulnerability of people who were absolute victims to their power, and they had no recourse. That is rape. That is not to say that perhaps somewhere along the way some feelings didn't develop, but they were rapists.
Yeah.
And so those who, landowners, slave owners, who exploited women who had no say, they were totally disenfranchised.
But it becomes excusable for them when they try to tell you today to look at it in an historical context that in that day they could get away with it, whereas in this day they can't. So the only thing between then and now is consequences. And without consequences that one would suffer today, we'd have the same activities going on. The mindset is the same. The only thing that's changed is consequences. The men in power, eventually, some of them do get caught doing the same things that they were doing back in the day, back in the 18th, 17th century. Today, of course, they get caught. They have a price to pay. Usually it's losing their status, losing their source of wealth. So there's a consequence that stops a lot of that from taking place. But back then, there weren't consequences, so you had more of it.
Right. And in preparation for us talking, you know what, I'm going to hold that until we come back. We're going to go to a quick break, folks, and we're going to come back with a subject that I obviously find very personally stimulating and of great interest, and I think it serves the greater good also. We'll be back in a few moments dealing with all things for the greater good on the Rock Newman Show with our guest, Rico Newman.
this is Leprechaun Tim Pohanka from Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai. It's hard to be down on your luck when you're Virginia's first choice for new Nissan and Hyundais, but I need to sell 60 cars this week. Right now, I'll pay you big bucks for your good luck. Bring down any good luck charm you've got, and based on the sale price of the car you choose, I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car this week. Today, your lucky penny is worth plenty, up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car you want. Stop moping and hoping you'll get approved. With my For the People credit approval process, the banks are looking to get lucky and lend to you, even if you've been turned down before. Bring me any good luck charm and I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car today. Hurry, once I get rid of 60 cars, the luck runs out. All offers require bank approval, so call us at 1-800-POHANKA, visit Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai on Route 1 in Fredericksburg, or better yet, log on to timpohankaforthepeople.com. And when we make a deal, I promise it'll be your lucky day. I'm Tim Pohanka, and I'm a leprechaun for the people.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back to the Rock Newman Show. Today, Saturday, September the 21st, 2013, our guest is Rico Newman, and we are talking about a subject matter that has just so many tentacles, it's difficult to know which avenue to go. One of the things that I found so fascinating, Rico, in doing some research in preparation for today's show was you being introduced at certainly what appeared to be a prestigious cultural event. And part of what you did that day when you were introduced is you gave a prayer. And I was sat there just sort of eyes bugged out, just riveted, because you spoke in a language that certainly I had zero familiarity with. My wife watched it with me, and it was such a beautiful prayer as you translated. So before we get into our, go the route that we're going with the rest of this interview, would you please share one of the prayers and describe what it is and interpret it for us?
Okay, I don't know which event that was. I was called on many occasions, especially at the National Museum of the American Indian, because every Native event starts off with prayer. You give first that credence to that power, because without it, nothing else happens. One of the things that I do in prayer, depending on what the context is, where I find myself, will determine how I'll do that prayer. Usually at tribal events, I'll do one relative to what we call the four directions. And pretty much, and I'm going to call this out. Usually I'll say the prayer to myself several times before I get up, so I haven't rehearsed this. So,
sure.
Kishilamokon, Wilashta, Ni Pitelo Gagun, Aki Angawu, Akita Shuki, Aki Angawu, Yawu Awashe, Kishilamakon, Suyawe, Halima Mik, Halima Miss, Gatunito Budisa. Gatunito Manatu, Manitu Wak, Obidi Wak, Ume Wak, Hakun Wak, Awak Sogame. That's a prayer. Basically, to interpret what I was saying, I was announcing first, asking the Creator to listen, that there is something important that we're doing and that we want them to hear what we have to say. We don't speak with each other without acknowledging that power is listening to everything that goes on. Usually tobacco is shared at those times among natives, knowing that tobacco carries not your words, but what's here and what's here with the smoke up there. So I can lie to you, but you lying to somebody else, you're going to have some serious consequences with. Right. So that prayer gets everybody to acknowledge that this atmosphere and this discussion that we're going to have, that we have to have honesty and truthfulness between each other. And the prayer goes on to acknowledge that the Creator is first, that before everything, there was the Creator.
Right.
That the Creator made everything, brought it there. Even spirits acknowledge the Creator as being omnipotent, and that we are way down the line somewhere. So we don't see ourselves as being created in the image of God, and that we're God-like in any way. That just puts us too far up the ladder. There are other forms of life that this prayer speaks to that, unlike human beings, every other thing that breathes and lives still follows its original instructions except us. We think that we are supposed to set our own path. We don't follow instructions that we were given from the Creator. Everything else does. A bird 1,000 years from now builds its nest the same way it does today. Dogs still do the same things they were doing back in Stone Age. Right. So anyway, that's what that prayer does. It basically sets the atmosphere for whatever business is going to take place. If it's one where people are going to speak, then a prayer would deal with four things. Number one is that they will physically be able to carry out what they're supposed to do. You hope that number one is that they're in a spiritual frame of mind. Not in some type of political balance or whatever. That's important. The other thing is that the mind stays clear, that they drink enough water to keep their words flowing. And from the east, you're looking at the sun, that there's light of day being shined on everything. So there's light out there. You're not going to trip and fall over falsehoods. So these prayers are very significant, again, to set up an atmosphere where discussion can take place without a lot of falsehood, trickery, and treachery.
Yeah. You know, as you're sharing, as you share the prayer, and as you interpret the prayer, what that speaks to is a profound respect for the divine. Yet, you know, when we talk about history and his story, there is the sense that Columbus came here and found these heathens. Heathens who, by their training and by their history, had, again, profound respect for the divine, for the earth, and everything living. And when you flip his story upside down, it ain't always a pretty picture.
It's a part of history that's not told, that's not uncovered, that's not put out there. And there's certainly, it's not that the material isn't available. I mean, there's a lot of writings from people like Beverly, Morton, and others in the house who spoke about the early contact with Native people and just how it's spiritual and how gracious and giving they were. They held nothing back. If I had a steak, let's say, and you were sitting over there, I'd give you my steak. Keep it. That's just the generosity that, and even if people looked at Columbus's early writings, and the only one that really put it out there truthfully was a guy named La Casa, a priest, a monk. He might have been a priest. It's hard to figure out exactly what his religious affiliation was with the Spanish church. But he wrote in detail the things that were happening to the Native people because of their spirituality. When you get into the 1500s with the people who came over from Sir Walter Raleigh down into the Carolinas, and the people that they met there, the generosity, and you look at the early writings, and this is not the same people you start to hear about when the English get here after the 1700s. All of a sudden, these generous, gentle, giving people become brutal, barbaric, the Antichrist. You know, they have no spirituality, which is wrong. Virtually every kid when in the third grade sees that painting of John White's that shows the 7 posts in a circle. He never tells the story. And there is a story with it that John White wrote, but they don't put that with the picture. They just show the natives dancing around these poles, and it gives you the image that they worshipped these craven images without explaining what these things were about. But later on, you get into exactly what they are. Today, that's coming out, that this is the 7 grandfathers that were being honored, so to speak. And the circle has a lot to do with native cosmology, axiology, et cetera. But you don't get that in early education. When I was at the museum, people would come in and ask questions, and I would ask them, where did you hear that? I don't know. But it's something that was ingrained in them as children, probably by the time they were in the 3rd and 4th grade with the material that they were reading. We would go out to schools, and teachers would approach us, this is staff members from the museum, and they would say, this is the material that we're teaching the kids here at the school. And I'd look at it, and I'd tell them, well, I'm not an educator. I can't really give an opinion on this, but I will take it back, give it to the people in the education department at the museum, and let them look at it. And there wasn't one that would give it back and say, I don't know who's using this, but tell them they need some new material.
Yeah.
It's old, and those books are still being used in the Maryland educational system, but it'll probably be another show. But there's a lot going on to change that. Fortunately, we have Governor O'Malley who's doing something about, who mandated that Maryland Indian history be included in the curriculum from elementary through high school, which is something that's never been done. You know, after the 3rd page and the 3rd grade, you never hear about an Indian again in the state of Maryland. You basically disappear.
Right. Okay, so let's deal here. I can't believe how fast time is going by, and you're right. There are 2 or 3 or 10 more shows that we can do. But let's deal with some of this. You know, I put on Facebook, you know, announcing and promoting your appearance here today at Busboys and Poets. And I'm telling you, we got a lot of response. One of the responses was, and I'll spare the names, But one of the responses was, well, what difference does it make what we are? One of the responses was, I'm 100% Native American, 100%. And I responded to that, and I said, I am sure that you are a wonderful spirit, but your grandfather, my great-grandfather on your maternal side is my great-grandparents on your maternal side are your grandparents. And the one thing I can assure you of is you're not 100% anything. I don't know all of what you are, but I know what you ain't. And you ain't 100% of anything. And so part of what I think there was a fervent, taught denial. I said, and to deny such is to deny reality. Because I think that from what research I've done and what I've, heard you say, there is a mixture of ancestry and colors. And it seems to me that for loose term Brandywine people, light-skinned people who have that multicultural mix, that there is, and one, you're in a position where there's a multicultural mix, and almost basically you can choose which way you want to live, and it doesn't make that way you want to live wrong or anybody else right. Now, I would totally defend her right to claim which way she wants to live. But to say I'm 100% something, I think is to deny reality.
Well, it kind of is. I can't sit here with green eyes and you sit there with yours in there and say the way I mix with something. That just flies in the face of reality.
Right.
You pretty much have to look at what happened here, especially in the eastern United States, with what happened around the Mediterranean. You go all the way back to a guy named Moses Maimonides.
What was the name?
Moses Maimonides.
Moses Maimonides.
Who did very early writing, we're talking a couple thousand years ago or better, about the Mediterranean being a melting pot. And the way he described it, that the reason the people around the Mediterranean stayed among themselves is as you got away from the Mediterranean, as you went north and people became lighter, and as you went south and people became darker, that you were moving into areas of unintelligence.
Darker.
Yes, dark. The lighter you got, the darker you get. So this is very early racism, if you will, where he was delineating intelligence based on the lightness or darkness of skin.
Right.
But if you were around the Mediterranean, you were olive-skinned and you were of the Arabic persuasion, etc., you were okay. Moses Maimonides himself was a Jewish guy out of Spain who went to Egypt to be educated as a barber/physician.
Yeah.
Intelligent man for his time. But that same type of attitude, mentality, brings itself over to the east coast of the United States when you have this sudden, influx of people from Europe. So some of the research I'm doing now is what was going on with the writers of the 1920s, 1930s about this early association between Europeans and the people that they found here. Africans were introduced long after that. Of course, they were in Virginia before they were in Maryland.
Right.
But eventually it would come. And I'm finding out that a lot of the writings I'm seeing about what they call sloth among the early European colonists, that the land was so fruitful that they didn't need to work. And what was happening is that these guys did not bring them over here to sit on their butts and take the low-hanging fruit and not work. They wanted them to work and produce surplus, because it was surplus that they were after.
Right.
That was the cash. So they weren't going to have this. But eventually they were able to practice sloth anyway, because now you had slaves doing the manual labor. So it still worked. And it's a part of history that isn't told, that isn't elaborated on among people, and especially in schools. But again, you're going to get this mix. And what happens to the American Indian here when they're pushed off of the prime land. You know, our people all along the Potomac River, all along the Patuxent, along the waterways. You've got everything you need there. You've got shellfish. You've got seasonal fish coming in, like the herring, which, you know, my dad, your dad used to get barrels of them. I couldn't stand them. They had too many
salted.
bones.
Yeah, you're right.
Too many bones for me. You know, you had everything that you needed. You had the deer. You had the turkeys. You everything. I mean, it was an Eden. But when you're pushed off of a way of life that you've known for thousands of years, 10, 20, and as we're finding out now, 30,000 years with the most recent find, that's a long time. And that's the first part of history, of our history, I always look at, that time going back before contact, what was going on there. Then you have a very short period of time from 1634 to 1700, 66 years. In that short span of time in there, the European totally destroyed our culture, our language, our way of life, our spirituality, gone by 1700. And from 1700 on, suddenly you don't hear a word about Native people in the state of Maryland. Why? You know, and that's the big question, why? It works. You know, if I don't write about you, and if I put everything that's credible has to be literate, because a literate society has power over an oral tradition. And for me, literate is simply oral that's been put in writing.
Right.
But the state of Maryland, and again, that's another thing when we get into recognition, would not accept oral history. It had to be from primary sources, which...
And what's the relevance of that?
It's what they believe in. It's what they wrote. It's you go back to Heck Wilder, Zeisberger, and other people who were writing, who were there at that time. They write down what they observe. But
Right.
you know, it's the old thing. You and I see an accident. You saw a blue car. I saw a green one.
Sure.
So, and plus these guys had their own agendas.
Right.
They had to report back to somebody. They weren't independently wealthy. So if their story didn't promote something back home that was going to send investors, new colonists to work the ground, et cetera, then they weren't doing their job. So a lot of what they were doing that came to be primary documentation was nothing but propaganda. And a lot of people now are starting to see that. So, you know, you had this big thing where people saying you're trying to revise history. Well, it needs to be revised. The truth needs to be told. And when you see something that you know is false, that this person had an agenda in writing what they wrote, then it's time to investigate it and change it. And a lot of the kids now who are in colleges that are historians, social anthropologists, they're starting to look at these things and starting to rewrite.
You know, I have something here. There's a couple of questions from various people that wrote in that wanted some questions asked. I'm going to try to get to these, but I want to go to one more first. There was a exchange again on Facebook, and the person who said I'm 100%. Someone really challenged her, and they challenged her aggressively. And what this person gave an example of is that this person, let's call her Susie, definitely not her real name. Susie said in 1992, she went to, I'm pretty sure it was like a Piscataway organization of sorts. And that that somebody mother happens to be an aunt of mine. I clearly know her well. She is an aunt that actually has a little browner skin than much of our family. She married my uncle. That's how she became my aunt. Now, she evidently was overseeing something, and she told this particular person that if you had one drop of African blood in your line, you could not become a part of the Piscataway, whatever it was. Now, you know, and she, when she wrote me, we then talked. She was hurt by that then, and she was still feeling that hurt 2 days ago. So, any response to that?
Well, people believe what they want to believe, even in the face of reality. You can put something right in this old expression, you can lead a horse to water but can't make him drink.
Right.
You can lay it out in front of people that if you were untouched by the history that went on in the state of Maryland between 1634 and the 21st century, then I don't know what cave you were in. It would be pretty hard to miss what was going on. Not to say it couldn't happen. All things are possible. But if you're speaking biologically,
Yeah.
You'd have to get a scientist to describe what goes on biologically. Culturally, that's an entirely different thing. Now, a person can say that they are 100% culturally one thing or another.
Culturally. Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a book out called One Drop. Right. And there's another one coming out next month called To Keep the Blood Pure.
Okay.
Which deals with the interrelationship between blacks and African Americans. I mean, between natives and African Americans. Uh-huh. I've already pre-ordered it, okay. So I'm anxious to read that one. But it is in the mind of the person as to what they're thinking. I don't know this person, or at least I probably do, but
you do.
But I don't
right.
know who it is. But it's hard to say where they're coming from with that. Now, it can be a thing that was, again, passed down from grandparent to parent to child.
Sure.
And if they're told, stay away, isolate yourself, then that's pretty much what they do.
Because I know this, because I know this person, and I understand some of the mentality. When we talk about white supremacy and racism and its insidious effects on society still today, I know that particular person to be one whose mindset, and I think lack of education and lack of understanding, is one that she would be maniacal in her desire to deny that there's any possibility that some African blood might be coursing through her veins. Now, from everything that I've understood, from whatever little education I've gotten in my life, and recent times sitting here at this table, the original person that walked the face of this planet was from Africa. And so if that's the case, then we all got a little bit. But this was, much more recent times that I think that, she had such an incredible desire. And why does that happen? And when you talk about culture, you talk about education, you talk about the society, you talk about the incredible job that's been done that says, and that, the ignorant have believed that, all things good come with a white color, like angel food cake and all the rest, and the devil food cake is chocolate. And that mentality, unfortunately, pervades too many today. We're going to talk about a whole lot more of all of this when we come back on the Rock Newman Show today, September the 21st, 2013, from the Langston Hughes Room at Busboys and Poets.
My baby drives a handcuff.
The weekend is here, and no matter what the weather's like outside, you'll find the deals inside here in the beautiful showroom of the all-new Pohanka Hyundai in Capitol Heights during their giant Markdown Madness sale.
Smart shoppers know that every new Hyundai in Pohanka comes with Hyundai Assurance and America's best 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. But why don't you tell them about the markdown sale, Joe?
I'll be happy to, Kim. Folks, shop around on the web, and you'll see lease payments on a new 2013 Elantra GLS at $179 a month. Today at Pohanka Hyundai, $99 a month. That's right, a $99 payment on a brand new Elantra.
And $89 a month on a new 2013 Accent GLS Automatic. How do they do it, Joe?
It must be the volume, Kim. A brand new building, hundreds of new Hyundais, and Pohanka's low payment and easy credit programs are designed to get everybody driving. But you have to get here today. Rush to the giant Markdown Madness sale at exit 13 off the Capitol Beltway.
Pohanka Hyundai, king of the Beltway. All financing for a limited term on approved HMF credit.
My baby drives a Pohanka.
And now, the Rock Newman Show.
Folks, welcome back to this absolutely fascinating subject matter. My guest is Rico Newman. He doesn't refer to himself as such, but he's a historian. He's an incredible researcher. He has worked with the Native American history. He's worked with the Smithsonian Institute. And for 40 plus years, he's really done an incredible amount of research, tracing back his own and therefore my family history, and also incorporating into his research a wide body of understanding of American history and beyond. There were several people, as I said, when I posted this on Facebook about this subject matter. We really got a lot of activity. We got a bunch of questions, and I kind of want to just jump to a few of them if I can and get your response in this last half hour. It says, since the Piscataway Conoy tribe has been recognized by the state of Maryland, a lot of people with the core surnames have come forward to join the group. If they have an ancestor who was a Proctor, a Newman, a Harley, a Butler, Savoy, Thompson, Swan, Queen, etc., I've been contacted several times over the years, and there's a definite trend, not saying this is for everybody. Quite a few are only interested in obtaining a scholarship for their kid or getting a pedigree chart with little interest in attending meetings or the powwows. How does Rico feel about that?
Well, one's entitled to their ancestry. One is entitled to who they are. Enrolling in the tribe, we found that a lot of people come forward with, the attitude of what's in it for me. And if there's nothing in it for me, why should I bother?
Right.
I can just continue on in my life, go to my 9 to 5, go do my, go to the bar or whatever you do, sports.
Right.
Because getting involved in the tribe does require a certain level of personal involvement. You can't be part of something if you're not involved. If you're a citizen in a county, you're going to be involved one way or the other. You don't have a choice. You're going to pay taxes. You're going to obey the laws, etc. So there's some involvement one way or the other, but where the tribe is concerned, one has a choice. They can opt to enroll and then sit on the sidelines and absolutely do nothing. And then if something does come along, like scholarship, employment opportunities, minority contracting opportunities, et cetera, then they can pop forward and put their name in and grab a chunk. I don't have feelings about it one way or the other. I mean, if someone's eligible to enroll. Maybe, like me, and have that in 30 years, a light bulb will go maybe something will happen in their life and hand that will encourage them or motivate them to find out something, to get beyond just, I have the name, I'm eligible to enroll, and beyond that, I don't have a clue. They know nothing about the history, the culture, the traditions, ceremonies, seasonal events, no clue about any of that.
Right.
But that's their choice. But if they're eligible to enroll, they should, because at some point in time, they may want to find out more about it. You never know when it's going to happen.
Right. It's very interesting. The gentleman who sets these cameras up here and does our live streaming television production, he made a comment, my white brother. He made a comment earlier, before we went on the air, and he said, with the advent of interracial marriage and all of that here in the U.S., and how the country is becoming more and more brown, in 100 years, we're not going to know who to hate. That's a good thing. I happen to, you can always have your identity, but I think that's a good thing. You know what? You said something that struck a chord with me earlier, and I was trying to figure out how this all worked or how we might be able to characterize something. We always want to put label on things. And that was when I was talking about the lady who said, I'm 100% Native American. The reality is that can be her cultural lane. And say, Stan, that can be her cultural lane. If that's what she identifies with, and that's what she wants, she's got a right, really, to do that. It was the U.S. here who came up with this racial construct and the one-drop rule. Lord knows there's a whole show on that.
Absolutely.
Now, for myself, I read Man-Child in the Promised Land by Claude Brown when I was 11 years old. And at 12 years old, this comet burst on the scene. His name was Cassius Marcellus Clay, who later on became Muhammad Ali. And the next year, seeing that it was with him during the time when he first came on the scene and won the title in 1964, was a guy named Malcolm X. So I read, soon thereafter, the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I started a trajectory which has really taken me, which some people might say as a radical, sort of a Pan-Africanist, African-American, strong black revolutionary voice and cultural positioning, if you will. That's just something I just did, and that's where I gravitated, and, in very public appearances on, national and international television, I've worn a dashiki, I've worn a kufi. So, like she said, I'm 100% Native American. My cultural leaning and my cultural approach and reality has been 100% black. Now, with that being said, what I'm understanding you to say, Rico, is that given what my ancestral biological reality is, that I would have a right to claim what?
Well, again...
I'm sorry, go ahead. Let me let
okay,
you.
when you start looking at it along those lines, like staying in your lane, a gentleman back in the 40s did a study. His name was Nichols. And he started observing what separated one group. Because, again, we're all humans. That's a human race. You start, again, the constructs of color and race are man-made items. Mm-hmm. But what this guy wanted to see the difference in, what made people different other than color. And he started looking at things like axiology, how people related to one another, how people did things as a group different from other groups. Mm-hmm. Now, he did that for the European, he did it for the Asian, he did it for the African. Mm-hmm. He was finding it very difficult to do it for Native Americans. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I noticed that someone else picked up on his work and has put in the categories what constitutes axiology for Native Americans. How do they relate to each other, or do they relate between individual and a group? Just how does
And that term is axiology?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like what you do?
Yeah, how you relate. Is it person to person? Is it person to the group?
Your behavior patterns?
Yeah, between each other.
I swear to God, I love watermelon and fried chicken. And collard greens. For whatever it's worth, whatever that make me. I also love fresh corn.
Yeah. But it's those things that separate one group from the other. It's like, oh God, I can't think of his name. He had a show on TV and he quit and ran off. A comedian from D.C. I used to watch him.
David Chappelle?
David Chappelle. Lord, he'd leave me laying in the aisle.
Yeah.
He had one on there a skit where he was blind.
He was blind?
He was blind. He was raised in the South by a racist white family.
Right.
He had no idea that he wasn't white.
That he wasn't white.
He wasn't white.
Right.
He had this Klan hood and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
Anyway, you can draw your own pictures with David Chappelle from there.
Right.
But it was hilarious. I mean, it was just the idea that he didn't have vision to know who he was. So he assumed he was who he was with.
Right.
And it wasn't until he went to a rally and somebody snatched the hood off that he still didn't know what time it was.
Right.
So, you know,
bust upside the head. Right, right.
So a person can still be sort of pulled out and still blind to who they are and what they are. It's a lot of things that happen, again, in our timeline that cause a lot of those opinions and for people to accept certain positions as far as who and how they identify. There was a gentleman who did a book years ago named The Only Land They Knew, who described how during that period of removal, when they said that all Indians in the East had to go to Oklahoma, many of the gentry, especially in the South, didn't want to get rid of their native people on there, so they said that they're not native, they're mixed, so they can stay here. Because they knew things that, of course, that the African slave did not know, because the African slave was pretty much limited as to how far he could go in terms of, but the Indian knew everything that was around, knew the waterways, knew where minerals, where plants, where certain trees, knew the environment. So they didn't want these guys to be shipped off somewhere to Oklahoma. They wanted to stay there. So the identity was changed, and that lasted for a while. Many, even in this area, there were Indians here in Maryland that were shipped to Oklahoma to an area called Going Snake. And if you look at the Dawes Roll and the Brown Roll over in Oklahoma, you'll find all of our family names on the Cherokee Roll. They would, by Dawes' definition, look at a sister and say, you look Indian, enroll her as a Cherokee. Look at the brother who now looked like the dad, who looked more white. You're not Indian. So here's a sister that is and a brother that's not. So, you know, you're going to have that based on phenotype. That happened. And a lot of people were removed from Maryland. So I'm looking back at that period. What would a father or a grandfather tell his children if they were approached and asked about their identity? You don't say you're Indian.
Right.
You're going to get shipped if you do.
Right.
I interviewed a gentleman some years ago. He was approaching his mid-90s, and his grandfather had taken him to actual spots where natives lived that were rounded up and shipped out, sent to Oklahoma. So it happened. So, and a lot of people don't realize native people, if you identified as native, you were not a citizen of the United States. It wasn't legal to be. You weren't a citizen until 1924. Right. And if you weren't a citizen, then you couldn't own land. So how could a guy that had a farm, trying to raise and feed his family, who is native, being approached by the census taker who's identifying himself, he's not going to open his mouth and say, I'm native. He'd be committing suicide, literally. Right. So what
would he say?
He would say he was a free person of color, because that was the going definition in that day and time. That moved from free person of color to colored person to Negro.
Right.
I always say that our grandfather was a chameleon or a lizard, because you look at the first census he was in 1880, then
that's
in
John the Baptist.
in 1900, he went from mulatto to colored to white to black. You know, so it depends on who was doing this.
He's a bad man. John the Baptist.
John the Baptist, he was blessing them.
Yeah.
But it depended on who was doing the census. And usually it was somebody working out of the sheriff's office. It wasn't a trained person that was going to do it.
Fascinating. You know, again, part of the reading, I came upon something this morning, in the early hours of the morning before I left home to come here. that I did not know. Well, the one drop rule, again, is something that was established to, again, for white supremacy. And what the one drop rule really was about was the white man controlling the white woman, saying that if you have a child by an African, by a black person or whatever, that person, doesn't matter that you're white, that person is going to be labeled as black. Now, I knew that. Mm-hmm. What I didn't know is that if a white woman had a child, bore a child by an African, by someone black, that in Maryland, I think Delaware, and I looked at a couple other places, they were put in they could be put in indentured servitude for 7 years and their children for 21 or 30 years.
Correct. Exactly. There was a good book put out some years ago called Good Wives, Nasty Wenches, and Nervous Patriarchs that describes what was going on with that mentality during that colonial antebellum period that caused people to have those kind of attitudes. It wasn't so much in the hand to deny somebody something, but it was to make sure that you would lose any prerogatives you might have had if you bore a child by someone other than a white man. Now, the law...
That's another... There are multiple definitions of white supremacy. One of them is insanity. And when you talk about, that's another definition, and what that is morbid fear of losing your place.
The thing is to make you seem less than what another person is. There was a study done on, as you label it, the Brandywine people back by this scientist, a psychiatrist, that said that we were all demented. You know, if you were of the Brandywine people in any kind of way, you were demented. End of story. You know, if you weren't suitable to rise above a certain level, that you were suitable to have picking a shovel or a broom or something like that, but you would never become a mathematician or science or to get into technology. Of course, that's been dispelled, but we still look around and find, okay, what does it take for our people to get into those arenas, into science and technology? And a lot of people right now are working on it to get those doors open because a lot of them were shut until we got to the position of having status. Kids couldn't get under the college rule anyhow, where you had to allow a certain number of minorities into your schools. Well, natives were accepted.
Natives what?
Were accepted.
Accepted.
With an exception. Uh-huh. Are you from an acknowledged tribe? So again, you're put behind the 8 ball. You're not able now to take advantage of any type of getting into college, getting scholarships, etc. Only way you could is step up and say, I'm black. Uh-huh. Now, okay, you qualify. Right. You know, when I went to a Department of Business and Economic Development forum on minority contracting, and the lady told me, well, you can't sign up because your tribe's not acknowledged. But she said, I had hair then, had a ponytail. Uh-huh. I'll tell you how long ago this was. And she told me, why don't you sign up as Hispanic? You have the name, Rico Manuel Newman. You have the look. Sign up as Spanish. We can put you in here. Mm-hmm. I said, no, I'm not going to deny who I am for money. Yeah. You know, it's not going to happen. I said, besides, somebody is going to blow the whistle on me. Now, y'all going to give me bologna sandwiches in the jail in Baltimore. Sure. That's not going to happen for me. Right. So you were encouraged, if you could, to get over. A lot of people got over. You know, it's the old thing back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. If you could pass yourself off as white, then you probably would try to, because it would mean a better life for you and your family. Right. Today in hand, I think a lot go to the other side because there's no benefit in that. But if they go to the other side, like scholarships, like minority contracting, people will say, okay, I'm black, because there's opportunity in saying so, the same way there was opportunity in saying that they were white. We lost a lot of relatives in the 20s and 30s who left. Nobody knows what happened.
When you say we, are you talking about our family?
Our immediate families moved, gone. Some went to California, some went to Ohio, et cetera, and lived their lives as Caucasian people.
Right.
Because there was benefit in doing that. I don't hold it against them. You know, they did what they felt they had to do.
Right.
You know, and that was something that happened during that period of time. We had an uncle who signed up with the colored troops during the American Civil War. He went down in the Carolinas fighting with the colored troops, and when the war was over, he mustered out. He stayed. He got married to a white woman, had children. Somebody dropped a dime on him, as they say.
So he married a white woman?
He married a white woman, had children.
He married a white woman and never told her?
Never told her anything about his past. He lived very comfortably. He had land. He was a productive member of that community, but somebody found out that he was one of them folks from Maryland.
Right.
And he had to catch the first thing smoking.
Wow.
And he never could go back. So we have some relatives down in Carolina somewhere that we're not aware of.
You know what? One of the things that when I came to Howard University, one of the things that I did hear a couple of times from my classmates at Howard who might have gone to the inner city schools who were vaguely aware of Brandywine people. Mm-hmm. They talked about the high incident of albinoism, if that's the right way, albinism, the way you say that. Now, I went to school, elementary school, with Proctors, and I know Harleys, that there were several albino kids in the classes, and the general conventional wisdom was from what was referred to as intermarrying. Mm-hmm. Any feedback, any research on any of that being true, false, or otherwise?
Well, actually, it was almost a requirement as part of our pursuing acknowledgement as Native people, because one of the things they want to look for is what was the rate of endogamous marriages. In other words, how many people were marrying out, or exogamy, as opposed to were marrying in. The church gave dispensation, because, you know, among the church, you couldn't marry anybody within third cousin. That's Catholic Church doctrine. Mm. But they gave dispensation for the Native people in southern Maryland to marry up to and as close as first cousins could get married. It was permitted. The church would allow it because the pool of eligible marriage partners was so small. In order to maintain a certain culture, then the church, feeling, I guess, some responsibility for what had happened to Native people, would allow this to happen where they wouldn't allow it for anybody else. So was there consequences? Certainly there are consequences when you start having people that closely related that are intermarrying. Now, in albinism, it happens in every group. Yeah. To a degree. Some people say that the condition that Michael Jackson had was somehow related to that. A lot of people would say that kind of condition was more notable in the Native community than any other, where you start losing pigmentation. And albinism is simply a complete loss of pigmentation. Right. Now, it's not isolated to any one particular group of people, certainly not to the Brandywine people or to Maryland Native people or Native people anywhere. You'll find albinism in every race.
Yeah, including Africa.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's not something particularly specific to that group, but certainly if people want to point it out, it's like some people, if you mentioned your name, they would say, "Oh, you're one of those." Mm-hmm. Right. You know, it's right. What's behind that? Right. You know, yeah, I'm one of those. Right. What happens next? Do I explode or what? So it's another one of those things, a label that's put on a group of people, and it's meant to be derogatory. Right. There's some credibility in it, but it's probably some credibility in everyone. I mean, what African-American person can definitely say that the person that they're with isn't a relative? Had no clue, right. You know, because there's no genealogy there. Right. There's no records. So that can happen. Then, boom, they pop up with an albino child, and they wonder, how did this happen? Or I recently saw an article in the paper where these two people who presume themselves to be Caucasian, the baby pops out and, woo, where'd this guy come from? So you never know.
Okay. A couple of things I want to get to certainly before we wrap up here. I have been a voice for now since the early 90s when I became aware of the name of Washington's professional football team. Some of the connotations that it took. There was no one that was a bigger fan of the football team than I was. But I found myself not being able to root with the same fervor for a while. And then I totally lost interest and didn't pay any attention to NFL football at all because I didn't have a team that I could root for anymore. And I couldn't root for the team that had a nickname that I thought was born out of a genocidal history. Is that fair?
That is very fair. I was asked a couple of years ago to research within Maryland, because Maryland did have on its books, and I correct myself, Maryland, as far as I know, still has on its book a bounty for Redskins. So it is derogatory. I mean, when you put a bounty on someone, and that name comes from it, and it's been posted in the media, et cetera, that there were bounties paid on Native people, especially during the French and Indian War. You know, you can bring in the hair, you can bring in an ear, blah, blah, blah. But what they found out that some of these guys were so unscrupulous that they were cutting the hair off of women, bringing it in and getting paid. And they said, no. I want to know that this person is dead. I want to see some red skin along with that hair. Mm-hmm. So you turn it in, that's the only way you're going to get paid.
Yeah. Folks, family, friends, and otherwise, there's no apology. There's no apology for making you feel a sense of discomfort by challenging you to grow to a sensitivity that says that name is not a name to be used. That name is not a name to be cheered for. I love the team. Please understand, honor, and respect the individuals who are impacted by that name that is indeed a slur. We can't tiptoe around that anymore. It is a disrespectful name. It is a name that is born out of rape, maiming, murder, and an absolute genocide and annihilation of a people. It ain't nothing cute about it. It ain't nothing noble about it. There's no longer any sensitivity about trying to talk about it in a way that makes you feel comfortable. You should feel uncomfortable to use that name. It is the quintessential, it is something that is quintessentially disrespectful. And to Dan Snyder, the owner of the team, you are being disrespectful. And I want to say that a definition of being racist is practicing racism, and you are practicing racism when you continue to steadfastly hold on to that genocidal, disrespectful name. Now, let's come back to Rock Newman for a moment. So, you've done the research. I have not. Now, I'm going to get deep all up in this so I can kind of see it and understand it and appreciate it and be knowledgeable about it, myself. But I'll ask you now, because I might come in here next week with some headdress on, go all the way back down to the floor and out there. So do I qualify to be part of what would be considered an Indian tribe? And I don't even know if that's the name, tribe or anything else.
Well, it's a political label that's put on. Many of the tribes have gone to referring to themselves as nation because it's more politically accurate.
Okay.
Tribe, when you say tribe, you start thinking primitive.
Okay.
It's the thing I did with kids when I go around school to have them close their eyes and see an Indian, describe him, blah, blah.
Right.
It's like they all saw the same person.
Right.
So the name is simply a label. But yes, to answer your question about you, yes, because the tribe has criteria you have to meet in order to enroll. There are three principal sources that you have to have somebody on one of the three. You have somebody on all three. So
on all three?
All three criteria.
Oh, and which is what?
With COP survey, Hart's chart, and the tribal roll of 1978.
Okay.
So if you have a blood relative that's on one of those, and Hartshart and Whitcops goes back a ways, 1940s, 1930s, et cetera, where they were doing research on those people, the we sort, the different folk down in Southern Maryland. So if you have a relative on one of those criteria and you submit your genealogy, and the Council of Elders takes a look at it. Now, it's not a wash. They look at it and determine it. Now, there was earlier a thing that if they knew that you never participated in anything tribal, that you were eligible by blood. But because you were the uninformed member, then that maybe there should be some requisite indoctrination, as it were, so that when you go out and tell somebody you're a Piscataway and they ask you something about the cultural tradition, you go, I don't have a clue.
Right.
Whereas, say, the Six Nations up in New York, the Haudenosaunee, if you're eligible to enroll and you did not grow up on one of their reservations and you were eligible by blood to enroll, you have to spend 6 months in the Longhouse. So that when you walk up and tell somebody that you're a Seneca or you're a Mohawk or you're a Cayuga, you're going to be able to tell them something about who you are.
Okay.
You're going to know something.
Folks, we have hit that spot where we've come to the end of the road. We've got hours more we can discuss about this subject. For right now, I'm going to just keep it saying that I'm Rock Newman, and we are one here at Busboys and Poets. Thank you so much for joining us today. Next week, same time, fascinating artist Stacey Ann Chin will be joining us, and she has a one-woman show at Busboys and Poets at 5th and K Street that night. So be sure to join us, come in, have a great breakfast, and great conversations. Until next week, this is the Rock Newman Show saying farewell and God bless.